Hi everyone, welcome to East Park. I hope you are all doing well. There is an adult cartoon that has used the N-word on national television, dressed a 9-year-old in blackface, made a Chinese restaurant owner who turned out to be a white man faking an accent for 9 seasons, and named its only black character, after a racist trope for over 20 years. Some people say this show is the most offensive thing ever put on television. Other people say it is the smartest. The show is called South Park, and today we are going to break down every single one of its most racist episodes and find out what they were really trying to say. But before we get into it, I would just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It is completely free and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we have managed to build. Anyway, let us begin. With apologies to Jesse Jackson and Randy Marsh and the N-word on Wheel of Fortune, there is probably no episode in all of South Park history that tackles the topic of racism more directly than Season 11, Episode 1, with apologies to Jesse Jackson. This is the episode where South Park decided to stop dancing around the most offensive word in the English language and just throw it right into your face. And what makes it so interesting is not just that they use the word over 40 times in a single episode without censoring it even once, but that underneath all of the shock value, there is actually something really smart being said about race, about understanding, and about the limits of empathy. So let us break the whole thing down. The episode opens on one of the most uncomfortable scenes South Park has ever created. Randy Marsh, Stan's dad, is a contestant on Wheel of Fortune. He has made it all the way to the bonus round, and his family is right there in the audience watching him live. Back in South Park, the whole town is watching from home too. Everyone is cheering him on. It is a big moment for Randy. The category for the bonus round is people who annoy you. Randy picks his letters and one by one the puzzle starts filling in. The letters he is given are R, T, S, L, and E. Then he picks B, N, G, and O. And when those letters go up on the board, the puzzle reads N blank G G E R S, with only one letter missing. The audience goes silent. Randy's family freezes. You can feel the tension through the screen. Pat Sajak tells Randy he has 5 seconds left to solve it. Randy hesitates. He knows what it looks like. He does not want to say it. But the clock is ticking, the pressure is building, and Randy blurts out the racial slur on live national television. The buzzer goes off. He got it wrong. The correct answer was naggers. The show cuts to a test screen immediately, and just like that, Randy Marsh's life is destroyed. Now, here is where the episode gets really clever. Instead of just making this one big shock moment and moving on, the writers split the story into multiple directions, and each one tackles a completely different angle on racism and how people deal with it. The very next day at school, Cartman is already loving this. He thinks the whole thing is the funniest thing he has ever seen and tells Stan he watched the clip about 60 times on YouTube. But Cartman also warns Stan that Tolkien, the only black kid in their class, is going to be furious with him because of what his dad did. Stan goes up to Tolkien and tries to explain things. He tells Tolkien that his dad is not a racist, he is just stupid, and that the whole thing is not a big deal, but Tolkien does not want to hear it. He tells Stan that he does not understand how black people feel when that word comes up, and that Stan should not be telling him it is not a big deal. This is really important because it sets up the entire emotional core of the episode. Stan is not a bad kid. He is not trying to be insensitive, but he genuinely does not understand why Tolkien is so hurt, and instead of listening, he keeps trying to fix things with words that only make it worse. Cartman, being Cartman, sees this tension between Stan and Tolkien and immediately tries to turn it into a full-blown conflict. He starts running around the school yelling race war and trying to get the two of them to fight each other. But Tolkien is not interested. He just walks away, and when Tolkien refuses to fight, Cartman takes that as a victory and starts screaming, "Token forfeits, whites win." Whites win again. It is one of those classic Cartman moments where you are laughing but also feeling deeply uncomfortable at the same time, because you know there are real people who think like this. Meanwhile, Randy is dealing with the fallout in the adult world. He decides that the best way to fix things is to go straight to the top, so he flies to meet Reverend Jesse Jackson to apologize in person. Jackson tells Randy that if he truly wants to apologize, he needs to kiss his butt. And Randy, desperate to make this go away, actually does it. A photo is taken of Randy literally kissing Jesse Jackson's behind, and that picture ends up in newspapers all over the country. It is humiliating, but Randy thinks it is over now. He thinks he has done what he needed to do. Stan hears about the apology and runs to Tolkien, thinking everything is fine. He says something like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that everything is cool now." My dad apologized to Jesse Jackson, and Tolkien fires back with one of the most quoted lines in South Park history. He says, "Jesse Jackson is not the emperor of black people," and Stan, completely confused, responds, "He told my dad he was." This exchange is perfect because it shows how clueless Stan is about the whole situation. He thinks that getting one famous black person to say it is okay somehow erases the harm. He does not realize that is not how any of this works. This is also where the real-world inspiration for the episode comes in. Back in November 2006, just a few months before this episode aired, comedian Michael Richards, the guy who played Kramer on Seinfeld, had a massive public meltdown at the Laugh Factory Comedy Club in Los Angeles. He was doing a stand-up set, some audience members started heckling him, and Richards lost it. He started screaming the racial slur at a group of African American and Hispanic people in the crowd. The video went everywhere. It was one of the biggest entertainment scandals of the year, and what happened next is what really caught the attention of the South Park writers. Richards went on an apology tour and specifically reached out to Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton to beg for forgiveness. The South Park writing staff, and especially a writer named Vernon Chapman, who is half black, found this incredibly frustrating. Chapman said that Jackson is not the ambassador of black people, and that reaction is exactly what inspired Tolkien's line in the show. Trey Parker and Matt Stone had actually wanted to write an episode about this word for a long time, but they could never figure out a story beyond the Wheel of Fortune opening scene. The Richards incident gave them the push they needed to finally put it all together. Back in the episode, Randy's problems are far from over. He goes to a comedy club and a black comedian named Coyote Brown spots him in the audience and calls him out as the N-word guy. The nickname sticks immediately. Everywhere Randy goes after that, people call him that. He cannot walk down the street, he cannot go to a store, he cannot go anywhere without someone pointing at him and using that label. He becomes a complete outcast. In his desperation, Randy creates the Randy Marsh African American Scholarship Foundation to try to prove he is not racist. It does not help. He even gets chased through the streets by a group of rednecks carrying shotguns, which is one of the funniest twists in the episode because these are not the kind of rednecks you would expect to care about racial sensitivity. They chase Randy while yelling things like, "We don't take kindly to social ignorance," and "You slandered an entire race of people on Wheel of Fortune." It is the show flipping the script on what you expect from these characters, and it works perfectly. Randy eventually gets rescued by a group of other men who have also been publicly disgraced for using the same word. Michael Richards himself shows up, along with Mark Furman, the former detective from the O.J. Simpson case who got caught using racial slurs on tape. Together, this group of outcasts lobbies Congress to pass a new law. The law states that if someone says the racial slur, there must be at least 7 words between it and the word guy in the same sentence, so that nobody can be called the N-word guy anymore. Congress passes it, mostly because the senators do not want to be called that either. It is completely absurd, but that is the point. The show is making fun of how America loves to create surface-level solutions to deep problems. Instead of actually addressing racism, they just pass a law about word placement in a sentence. The problem is not solved. It is just made technically legal to ignore. While all of this is happening with Randy, there is a whole other story going on at the school that ties everything together at the end. Because of what Randy did on Wheel of Fortune, the school decides to bring in a guest speaker to talk to the students about sensitivity and the power of words. The speaker is Dr. David Nelson, a man with dwarfism who has 2 PhDs and has published 6 books. He goes from school to school teaching kids about how hurtful words can be, drawing from his own experience of being mocked for his size. But the second doctor, Nelson walks on stage. Cartman starts laughing. He cannot stop. He is laughing so hard that Nelson cannot even get through his speech. Nelson tries to talk to Cartman one-on-one after the assembly, but Cartman just keeps making jokes about his height, calling him things like a little beat because his face turns red with anger. Nelson even arranges for the other students to call Cartman fatso to try to teach him what it feels like to be insulted, but Cartman just laughs that off too. He does not care. Words genuinely do not hurt him, which completely undermines Nelson's whole message. This eventually leads to a physical fight between Cartman and Dr. Nelson. Nelson is apparently a black belt in karate, so he comes ready to prove that he is not limited by his size. The song "Down with the Sickness" by Disturbed starts blasting as the two of them go at it. But even though Nelson is a trained fighter, Cartman still manages to pin him down. While Nelson is stuck on the ground, Cartman makes him say, "Carol Ann, don't go into the light," which is a reference to the movie Poltergeist, making fun of Nelson's voice. Nelson eventually gives up, storms off, and declares, "I've proven my point. My work here is done." Kyle turns to the others and says, what was his point? And nobody has any idea what Nelson was trying to prove. And this is where the genius of the episode kicks in. Stan is standing there after watching this whole mess, and he says, "Dude, I don't get it." And then something clicks. He pauses, he looks at Kyle, and he says, "Wait a minute, that's it. I don't get it." He runs to find Tolkien, and when he catches up with him, he finally says what Tolkien has been waiting to hear the entire episode. Stan tells Tolkien that he gets it now. He says he has been trying to tell Tolkien that he understands how he feels, but the truth is he will never understand. He will never really get how it feels for a black person to have somebody use that word against them. He does not get it, and he never will, because he is not black. And Tolkien, for the first time in the whole episode, is satisfied. He simply says, "Now you get it, Stan." That is the message. The whole episode builds to this one moment. The point is not that white people need to go on apology tours, or kiss anyone's behind, or create scholarships, or pass laws about word placement. The point is that some experiences cannot be fully understood from the outside. The best thing Stan can do is not pretend he gets it. It is to admit that he does not and cannot. That admission, that honesty, is what Tolkien needed to hear all along. Not fake understanding, just the truth. What makes this episode even more remarkable is how it was received. The slur was used 42 times throughout the episode without a single bleep. You would think that would cause a massive uproar, but the backlash was surprisingly small. The NAACP actually praised the episode, with members of the organization abolish the N-word, calling it a good example of educating people about the power of hate words and their impact. IGN gave the episode a perfect 10 out of 10 score, the AV. Club called South Park's handling of race in this episode borderline revolutionary. For an episode that used the most offensive word in the language more than 40 times, the response was overwhelmingly positive because people could see that the message underneath it all was actually meaningful. It was not using the word for shock, it was using it to make you feel something and then telling you that some people feel that something every single day of their lives, and you will never fully understand what that is like. Trey Parker himself has said that the Wheel of Fortune scene is one of his favorite things they have ever created on the show. And Matt Stone loved the ending so much that he said something very interesting on the DVD commentary. He said that if there was a word as hateful toward white people as that word is toward black people, white people would make it illegal immediately. That thought is basically what drives Randy's entire story in the episode. When Randy gets labeled the N-word guy and experiences just a fraction of what it feels like to be defined by a single word, he goes all the way to Congress to get it banned. The irony is impossible to miss. This episode is the perfect starting point for this video because it does what South Park does best. It takes something that everyone is afraid to talk about, rips away all the politeness and the tiptoeing, and forces you to look at it directly. And somehow by the end, you come away with a message that is more thoughtful and more honest than most serious dramas could ever deliver. It is 22 minutes of pure discomfort with a payoff that actually changes how you think about empathy and race. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously, but if you thought this was the only time South Park used racial tension to hold up a mirror to America, the show went even further with an episode where the entire town of South Park starts acting like the Ku Klux Klan, and the target this time was not a word, but an entire community of wealthy black families who made the mistake of moving into town. Here comes the neighborhood. Token, the KKK, and South Park's Richers. If the last episode we talked about was South Park being direct about racism, this one is South Park being sneaky about it. Season 5, Episode 12, Here Comes the Neighborhood, aired on November 28th, 2001, and it is one of the most cleverly written racial episodes in the entire series because, on the surface, nobody in the episode is being racist at all. They are just being classist. They hate rich people. It just so happens that every single rich person in the episode is black. And the show never once acknowledges this out loud until the very last second, when the truth finally slips out in the most South Park way possible. The episode starts with a scene at school where the kids are presenting their class projects. Butters goes first and shows off a little volcano that oozes gooey lava. He gets a check, which he is happy about because he thinks that is like a C. Cartman goes next and literally just shows a pencil taped to a pen, claiming it represents the duality of writing devices that occurs in nature. The teacher calls him out for putting it together right then and there and gives him a check minus. Then it is Token's turn, and Token pulls out a completely different level of project. Using his laptop, he hooks into the internet, downloads data from a meteorology website, and uses his dad's video projector to show the class a graph of predictable weather patterns over the next 3 months. While everyone else is making volcanoes out of baking soda, Token is basically giving a professional presentation. This is where the teasing starts. The other kids start ripping on Token for being rich. They point out that his house is 4 times bigger than anyone else's in town. They mention that his family has their own pool table and their own sprinkler system. They bring up how Token wears Armani Exchange while everyone else buys their clothes at J-Mart. Cartman flat out asks Token if he has ever even been inside a J-Mart, and Token cannot answer because the truth is he has not. Kyle mentions the crab cakes and lobster tail in Token's lunchbox, while the rest of them are eating regular school lunches. Token tries to deny that his family is rich, but the evidence is too much. He goes home that day and asks his parents why they have a bigger house than everybody else. His dad explains that they went to graduate school and have more high-paying jobs than most people in town. He says Token's mother is a chemist for a pharmaceutical company, and then, in classic South Park fashion, he adds that Token's friend Eric Cartman's mother is a crack whore, and that one pays more than the other. Token is upset. He tells his parents he does not want to be rich anymore. He says he wants to eat macaroni and cheese for dinner and wear clothes from J-Mart. His parents are confused, but try to make him happy. They take him to J-Mart to buy cheap clothes, and his dad even pays some random guy in the parking lot to park their car for them, which completely defeats the purpose of trying to look less wealthy. But none of it works. Token still feels like an outsider. He is the only rich kid in a town full of families who are lower to middle income, and he has nobody who understands what his life is like. So Token comes up with a plan. He creates a 2-page advertisement for Forbes magazine, selling South Park as the next Aspen, a beautiful, unspoiled mountain town in the Rockies with cheap land. The ad works. Will Smith sees it in Forbes and gets excited. He tells his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, about it, and they decide to move their whole family to South Park so Will can live like a cowboy and raise the kids in the country. One by one, more wealthy celebrities follow. Snoop Dogg moves in. Kobe Bryant moves in. Oprah Winfrey moves in. P. Diddy moves in. Bill Cosby moves in. Massive mansions start going up all over town. Token is thrilled. He finally has people around him who understand what it is like to be wealthy. But here's the thing the episode never says out loud. Every single one of these wealthy celebrities who moves to South Park is black. Every single one. And the show knows exactly what it is doing by having this be the case, because what happens next is a beat-for-beat recreation of how racism works in America, except the show frames the entire thing as being about money instead of skin color. The working-class white residents of South Park immediately start complaining. Jimbo says he remembers back in the day when rich folks were not allowed in South Park. Skeeter says the rich people are going to send their kids to their schools and mix them with their pure, non-rich kids. If you replace the word rich with any racial term, these sentences become textbook examples of the kind of things said during the segregation and the civil rights era. But the characters do not see it that way. To them, this is only about money. The fact that they sound exactly like racists is something the show leaves entirely for the audience to notice on their own. Mr. Garrison becomes the ringleader of the anti-rich movement. He starts calling the wealthy residents richers, which sounds almost identical to a certain racial slur. He also calls them cash chuckers. The other townspeople follow his lead and start discriminating against the rich families in ways that directly mirror how black people were treated throughout American history. They force the rich people to sit in the front of the bus, which is a flip on how black people were forced to sit in the back of the bus during segregation. They refuse to serve them in the working class bars. They make it clear that the wealthy are not welcome anywhere in their town. Skeeter and the other locals hurl insults at them on the street, saying things like, "Hey, Richie Rich," and "Hey, Cash Chucker, go have fun with your $2 million house." Meanwhile, Token is dealing with his own problems. He was so excited to finally have other rich kids around, but the rich kids who move in are nothing like him. Will Smith's children and the other wealthy kids all speak with snotty, exaggerated English accents and play upper-class games like polo. They find normal kid stuff like snowball fights to be beneath them. When Token tries to hang out with them, he realizes he has nothing in common with these kids either. They are rich, sure, but they are a completely different kind of rich. Token is a regular kid who happens to come from a wealthy family. These new kids are pampered and sheltered and do not understand the real world at all. When Token tells them that the other families in South Park never really had money, one of Will Smith's kids asks, "Well then, why don't their daddies just act in a movie?" She genuinely does not understand that not everyone can just go make millions in Hollywood. So now Token is stuck in this horrible middle ground. He is too rich for the poor kids and too normal for the rich kids. He does not fit in anywhere. It gets so bad that Token decides to go live with the lions at the South Park Zoo. The leader of the lions is named Aslan, which is a reference to the lion from the Chronicles of Narnia. Token stays with the lions for a while, but it turns out they just play bad practical jokes all the time. One of them does the old gum on the ground trick where you reach for a piece of gum and it gets pulled away. Token eventually gets fed up with the lions too and decides to leave. While Token is dealing with all of that, the situation in town between the poor residents and the rich residents keeps getting worse. The wealthy families, frustrated with how they are being treated, organize a millionaire march down the streets of South Park, singing "We Shall Persevere." This is an obvious reference to the Million Man March, a real gathering of black men that took place in Washington, D.C. in 1995, and the song is a play on "We Shall Overcome," the anthem of the civil rights movement. To make their march look bigger, the rich residents pay Chef, who is black, and several thousand Mexicans to join them. Again, the show is layering racial history on top of a class conflict without ever breaking character and saying this is about race. Everything is technically about money, but everything looks, sounds, and feels exactly like the history of racial discrimination in America. Mr. Garrison then takes things to the next level. He tells the townspeople that rich people are afraid of ghosts. His plan is simple. Everyone will put on white sheets and go scare the rich families out of their homes. The townspeople think this is a great idea, so they dress up in white sheets with pointed hoods and eye holes cut out, and they go marching through the neighborhoods at night. They also burn a lowercase letter T on the rich family's lawns, which Garrison says stands for time to leave. The mayor sees them and her jaw drops because what she is looking at is a group of people dressed exactly like the Ku Klux Klan, burning a cross-shaped symbol on black families' lawns. But the townspeople do not see it that way at all. They think they are just ghosts. And the rich families do not see it as racism either. They see actual ghosts. They start screaming that the town is haunted, which is a Southern folk term for haunted, and they pack up and flee South Park as fast as they can. The plan works. Every wealthy family leaves town. This is the brilliance of the episode. The entire time, neither side acknowledges that race has anything to do with what is happening. The poor white residents genuinely believe they are only upset about money. The rich black residents genuinely believe they are only being scared by ghosts. Nobody in the episode connects the dots. Nobody says the quiet part out loud. Except for one person right at the very end, after all the rich families are gone, mister. Garrison stands in front of the abandoned mansions and suggests that the townspeople should sell the empty houses and become rich themselves. The other men immediately point out the flaw in this plan. If they sell the houses and become rich, then there will still be rich people in South Park, and they will have become the very thing they hated. They would have to drive themselves out of town, but Garrison does not care about the logic. He starts his final line of the episode by saying, "Well, yeah, but at least I got rid of all those damn and the end credits cut him off before he can finish the word. That is the punchline. That is the reveal. After 22 minutes of every character insisting this was about class and not race, Garrison drops the mask in the final half second, and the audience realizes that, for him at least, it was always about race. The money was just the excuse. The richers were never just richers. They were always something else in Garrison's eyes. And the episode leaves you wondering how many of the other townspeople felt the same way but just never said it. This ending is one of the most talked about moments in South Park history because it reframes the entire episode in an instant. Everything you watched for the previous 21 minutes suddenly takes on a different meaning. The bus segregation, the slurs, the refusal of service, the white sheets, the burning symbol on the lawn, it was all racial the entire time. The show just let you come to that conclusion on your own by never spelling it out, and then confirmed it with one unfinished word. What makes this even more layered is Token's story, which has its own resolution that is completely separate from the racial stuff happening with the adults. After Token leaves the Lions and comes back to town, he runs into Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny. The boys explain to him that yes, they made fun of him for being rich, but that is just what they do. They rip on everyone. They rip on Kenny for being poor. They rip on Kyle for being Jewish. They rip on Stan for having a girlfriend. They rip on Cartman for being fat, for being stupid, for having a mom who sleeps around, and for being a terrible person in general. Ripping on each other is how they show they are friends. The fact that they made fun of Token meant he was one of them, not that he was an outsider. And now, since he got so upset about it, they are going to rip on him for being a pussy about the whole thing. Token actually smiles at this because he finally gets it. Being mocked was not rejection, it was acceptance. That is just how these kids operate, so the episode works on two completely different levels at the same time. On the kids level, it is a story about friendship and belonging and learning that sometimes being teased means people care about you. On the adults level, it is a razor-sharp breakdown of how racism disguises itself as something else. How people can do blatantly racist things, use racist language, perform racist actions, and still convince themselves that none of it has anything to do with race. The town of South Park put on KKK robes and burned symbols on black families' lawns and drove every black family out of their community, and they went to bed that night believing they had simply solved a class problem. Only Garrison's unfinished sentence tells the truth. This episode aired in 2001, but the themes it deals with have only become more relevant over time. The idea that racism can hide behind other concerns, whether it is money, property values, school quality, or neighborhood culture, is something that plays out in real communities all over America to this day. And South Park managed to capture that entire concept in 22 minutes without a single character ever saying the word racism until it was too late. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But South Park did not limit its racial commentary to just America's black and white divide, because there is another group that the show went after with some of the broadest and most exaggerated stereotypes it has ever put on screen, and it all started with a little Japanese cartoon called Pokomon that turned out to be a secret plot to bomb Pearl Harbor. Pokomon in Japan, Pearl Harbor, and the small penis trick South Park has gone after just about every group of people you can think of, but when it came to Japanese culture and stereotypes, the show did not hold back even a little bit. Season 3, Episode 11, Pokomon first aired on November 3rd, 1999, right in the middle of the biggest pop culture craze of the late 90s. Pokemon was everywhere. Kids were watching the show, buying the cards, collecting the toys, and begging their parents for the video games. It was impossible to escape. And Trey Parker and Matt Stone looked at this entire phenomenon and thought, what if we turned the whole thing into a secret Japanese military plot to bomb Pearl Harbor? That is exactly what this episode is, and it is loaded with some of the most exaggerated Japanese stereotypes the show has ever put on screen. The episode kicks off with Cartman watching a new Japanese cartoon called Pokomon. The name itself is already a joke that most English-speaking viewers would not catch. In Japanese, the word chinpoko is a crude term for a small penis, so Pokomon roughly translates to small penis monster. The show within the show is a direct parody of Pokemon, complete with a main character who looks like Ash Ketchum rambling about becoming a master and catching all of the creatures. As soon as the cartoon ends, a commercial airs for Pokomon toys, and Cartman immediately forces his mom to take him to the store to buy some. When they get there, every other kid in town has already beaten them to it, and the shelves are almost empty. This perfectly captures how the real Pokemon craze worked. Kids were going crazy, trying to collect everything, and stores could not keep the products in stock. At the bus stop the next morning, Kyle shows up holding his old Cyborg Bill toy, and the other boys tell him that Cyborg Bill is out and Pokomon is in. Kyle is behind the trend. He goes home and asks his dad Gerald for money to buy the toys. Gerald tries to give Kyle a speech about not following fads just because everyone else is, telling him he can make a stronger statement by being an individual. Kyle fires back with one of the most realistic lines a kid has ever said on this show. He tells his dad that in the real world, he can either get a Pokomon or be the only kid without one, which singles him out and causes the other kids to make fun of him and kick his butt. Gerald pauses, sees the logic, and just hands him $10. It is a small moment, but it says a lot about how peer pressure actually works with kids and how even parents know they cannot fight it. This is where the episode starts layering in the racial stereotypes. Kyle goes to Cartman's house to find the boys playing the Pokomon video game. Kyle shows up with a toy he just bought, but the boys tell him toys are already out of fashion, and now it is all about the video game. While they are playing, the camera shows what is actually on the screen. The game is not some cute monster collecting adventure. It is a simulation where the player bombs Pearl Harbor. A Japanese woman keeps popping up on screen encouraging the kids to keep bombing. And while Cartman and Stan are blasting away at a digital version of the harbor, Kenny starts having a seizure on the floor from the flashing lights of the game. This was a direct reference to a real incident in 1997 when an episode of the actual Pokemon anime caused nearly 700 Japanese children to have seizures because of a scene with rapidly flashing red and blue lights. The episode was banned in Japan and became one of the biggest controversies in anime history, and South Park worked it right into the script. Meanwhile, the Pokomon toys are doing something strange at night. While Cartman is asleep, an antenna pops out of his Pokemon doll and sends a signal out the window. The signal joins with other signals from other toys across town and bounces off a satellite all the way to the Pokemon Toy Corporation headquarters in Japan. Inside the headquarters, Emperor Hirohito watches screens showing each toy's location while soldiers load their rifles behind him. The entire Pokemon franchise is revealed to be a front for a Japanese military operation to brainwash American children into attacking their own country and bombing Pearl Harbor again as revenge for World War II. It is completely absurd, and that is the point. The show is taking the real American fear of Japanese cultural influence in the 90s and blowing it up to the most ridiculous extreme possible. Things move fast from here. The next big Pokemon product is a special camp that all the kids sign up for. At the camp, which is set up inside a traditional Japanese palace, Emperor Hirohito himself tells the children that the evil power they must destroy is the American government and that they will begin by attacking Pearl Harbor. The kids start learning Japanese. They go back to school speaking it in class, which drives Mr. Garrison crazy. Trey Parker actually studied Japanese in college and speaks it well, so all the Japanese dialogue in the episode is real and accurate. When the kids start talking to Garrison in Japanese, one of them even tells him that Juhachi is 18, which is a correct translation. This was not random gibberish. Parker made sure the language was authentic, which makes the stereotyping even more layered because the show put real effort into the culture it was making fun of. The parents start getting worried. Randy and Sharon sit down to watch a tape of the Pokemon cartoon to see what their kids are learning. They cannot understand a single thing that is happening. The characters speak in broken English, the plot makes no sense, and the whole thing seems completely stupid. They conclude that the show is not violent or vulgar, just really dumb, so they figure it is harmless. This is a jab at how real parents reacted to Pokemon at the time. Most adults could not make sense of it, so they either ignored it or dismissed it as a phase that would pass on its own. But the adults eventually realize something is seriously wrong when the kids start chanting about destroying America. They go to confront the Japanese creators of Pokomon, and this is where the episode introduces its most famous and most controversial running joke. Every time an adult tries to question what Pokomon is really about, the Japanese executives shut them down by complimenting the size of American penises compared to their own. They say things like, "You Americans have such large penises. Ours are so small," and it works every single time. The American men get so flattered and flustered by the compliment that they completely forget what they came to talk about and walk away feeling great about themselves. The women, including Sharon, try to point out that this is obviously a trick, but the men are too caught up in the ego boost to listen. The shop owner, who originally went to Japan to investigate, gets the same treatment. He goes in ready to confront them and leaves feeling like $1,000,000 without asking a single real question. According to the DVD commentary, this recurring joke was based on someone Trey Parker and Matt Stone actually met in Beijing who kept insisting on comparing anatomy. A South Park animator named Junichi Nishimura, who Matt Stone knew from college, voiced Emperor Hirohito in the episode, so even behind the scenes, there was a real connection to Japanese culture informing the stereotypes on screen. The Japanese executives are not the only stereotypes in play here. The episode also includes 2 fake commercials for American toys that the parents try to use to distract their kids from Pokemon. The first is the Wild Wacky Action Bike, a glow-in-the-dark bicycle that the commercial itself admits is almost impossible to steer. The second is Alabama Man, an action figure of a stereotypical American redneck who drinks beer, goes bowling, chews tobacco, and beats his wife. The commercial literally says, when wife asks him where he's been, just use the action button and Alabama man busts her lip open. One of the kids playing with the figure in the commercial has Alabama man smack his wife with a bowling ball. Both of these fake products are presented to the boys in a focus group, and the boys dismiss both of them as lame. The parents cannot compete with the hold that pokomon has on their kids. The situation keeps getting worse. The kids march through town, led by Emperor Hirohito himself. They are dressed in military style and chanting in Japanese. The adults try to get President Bill Clinton to do something about it, but when the Japanese executives meet with Clinton, they use the same flattery trick on him and he falls for it too. The President of the United States is neutralized by a comment about his anatomy. Nobody in a position of power is willing to stop what is happening because they all keep getting distracted by the same shallow compliment. It is the show saying that American pride and ego are so fragile that you can shut down any serious conversation by stroking it in the right way. Finally, the parents come up with a plan that actually works. They figure out that kids are naturally rebellious. Whatever their parents like, they automatically think is uncool. So instead of fighting pokomon, the adults all pretend to love it. They show up wearing pokomon shirts, carrying the toys, and talking about how much they enjoy the show. The effect is instant. The moment the kids see their parents acting excited about pokomon, they lose all interest. Every single kid drops the fad on the spot because nothing kills something cool faster than your mom and dad being into it. It is one of the most accurate observations about how kids actually work that the show has ever made. Every kid except Kyle, that is. Kyle has been one step behind the entire episode. When everyone was buying toys, Kyle was still playing with his Cyborg Bill doll. When everyone moved on to the video game, Kyle had just bought a toy. When everyone went to camp, Kyle had just bought the video game controller. He has been chasing the trend the whole time and never caught up. So when everyone else drops pokomon, Kyle is the one kid who is still into it. He climbs into a fighter jet on the runway, ready to go bomb Pearl Harbor by himself. Stan tries to talk him down by giving a speech about how they all got caught up in group thinking and that following the crowd is bad. But Kyle points out that if he stops liking pokomon now, just because everyone else stopped, he would still be following the group. So to be a true individual, he has to keep liking it and go bomb Pearl Harbor alone. Stan realizes his own argument backfired and quickly changes his position, telling Kyle that actually, sometimes going along with the group is a good thing and can help you make better choices. Kyle gets completely confused by the contradicting messages, gives up, and climbs out of the jet. The episode was nominated for an Emmy Award in 2000. Critics loved it. DVD Verdict called it perhaps the most devastating parody of the seemingly endless pop culture craziness of Force Japan fads. IGN praised it as a great takedown of the Pokemon craze with crude jokes about Asian anatomy. The episode was also banned in Japan because of its stereotypes about Japanese people and culture, its mockery of Emperor Hirohito, and its references to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Japanese nationalists and even Nintendo took issue with the episode, seeing the parody of their biggest franchise as disrespectful. The thing about pokomon is that it works on multiple levels at the same time. On one level, it is making fun of how kids blindly follow trends without thinking about what they are actually consuming. On another level, it is poking at American parents who do not pay enough attention to what their kids are into. But on the racial level, it is stacking Japanese stereotypes on top of each other. The scheming executives, the broken English, the military obsession with Pearl Harbor, the jokes about anatomy, the sinister hidden agenda behind a cute exterior. These are all old stereotypes about Japanese people that go back decades in American culture, and the show cranks every single one of them up to the highest possible volume. Whether you think the show is mocking those stereotypes or just using them for cheap laughs depends on who you ask. But what nobody can deny is that this episode hit a nerve, especially in Japan, and it remains one of the most racially charged episodes in the entire series when it comes to Asian representation. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And speaking of Asian stereotypes, pokomon was far from the last time South Park went after that part of the world, because years later, Cartman would become so paranoid about Chinese people taking over America that he would dress up in traditional Chinese clothing, walk into a restaurant, and hold the entire place hostage at gunpoint. The China problem. Cartman's anti-Chinese paranoia after the Beijing Olympics, so pokomon used Japanese stereotypes to make fun of American gullibility. But almost a decade later, South Park came back to Asian stereotypes with an episode that was way more direct and way less subtle about its racism. Season 12, Episode 8, officially titled The China Program with the word problem, intentionally misspelled to mock a Chinese accent, first aired on October 8th, 2008, and this one does not hide behind clever satire or double meanings. This episode is Cartman at his most paranoid, his most ignorant, and his most racist, and it all starts because he watched the opening ceremony of the 2008 Beijing Olympics on television. The episode opens with Cartman having a full-blown nightmare. He is dreaming about the Beijing Olympics opening ceremony, and in his dream, the massive, perfectly coordinated performance by thousands of Chinese drummers is not a celebration of culture. To Cartman, it is a declaration of war. He wakes up screaming, completely convinced that the Chinese are about to invade America. He runs to his mom in the middle of the night, terrified, telling her that the Chinese are coming and that their advanced technology and population of over 2 billion people mean that America does not stand a chance. His mom tries to comfort him, but Cartman is not having it. In his mind, the invasion is already happening and nobody else can see it. The next morning at the bus stop, Cartman starts laying out his plans to stop the Chinese to Stan, Kyle, and Kenny. He is dead serious about this. He genuinely believes that the Olympics were the first step in a Chinese takeover of the United States, and that someone needs to do something about it immediately, but none of the other boys are listening. They are all distracted by something completely different. Stan tells Kyle that this is the part where Kyle usually calls Cartman a racist idiot and tells him to shut up, but Kyle says he just cannot do it right now. He says, "Sorry, I can't do this," and walks away from the bus stop looking devastated. This sets up the episode's two storylines that run side by side for the entire 22 minutes. On one side, you have Cartman's anti-Chinese paranoia. On the other side, you have Kyle, Stan, Kenny, Clyde, and Jimmy dealing with what they describe as the violent assault of one of their closest friends. They talk about it like it is a real crime. Kyle says he cannot pretend things are normal after watching his friend get attacked. He says the guilt of standing there and doing nothing is eating him alive. It sounds incredibly serious, like something truly horrible has happened. But when the show finally reveals what they are actually talking about, it turns out they are referring to the movie Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. They believe that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas assaulted Indiana Jones by making such a terrible sequel. The show literally depicts Spielberg and Lucas physically attacking Indiana Jones in nightmare sequences that reference real dramatic movies. It is the show's way of mocking people who act like a bad movie ruined their childhood. But let us focus on Cartman's side of things because that is where all the racial content lives. After getting completely ignored at the bus stop, Cartman needs to find someone who will take his Chinese invasion theory seriously. So he goes to the one person who is always easy to manipulate. He shows up at Butters' house while Butters is taking a bath, barges in, and tells Butters that if the Chinese invade, they will kill his mother and his father. Butters, being Butters, immediately panics and agrees to help. The two of them form what they call the American Liberation Front, which is basically just Cartman and Butters with no plan, no resources, and no idea what they are doing. Cartman's big idea is to go undercover and find out when the Chinese are planning to invade. His strategy for doing this is about as racist as anything the show has ever put on screen. He and Butters dress up in what they think Chinese children look like. They put on stereotypical Chinese costumes and start speaking in the most exaggerated broken English you can imagine, replacing L sounds with R sounds and bowing constantly. The two of them walk into a P.F. Chang's restaurant, which is a real American chain that serves Chinese-style food, and try to pass themselves off as Chinese kids. They approach a Chinese family that is eating dinner and start asking them questions about the invasion, speaking in their fake accents the entire time. The Chinese family is not amused at all. The father can immediately tell that these are just two white kids in costumes doing a terrible impression of Chinese people. He is annoyed and offended. He tells them to leave the family alone, but Cartman does not take the hint. He keeps pushing, keeps asking about the invasion plans, and keeps talking in the fake accent. The restaurant staff eventually steps in and asks Cartman and Butters to leave because they are bothering the other customers. This is where things go completely off the rails. Instead of leaving, Cartman decides that the Chinese must be hiding something and that drastic action is required. He tells Butters to pull out a gun, and suddenly the whole restaurant becomes a hostage situation. Cartman holds the entire PF. Chang's hostage, with Butters pointing a gun at the diners and staff, while Cartman tries to get the Chinese family to confess their invasion plans. This is a kid who watched an Olympic opening ceremony on television and is now holding innocent people at gunpoint in a chain restaurant because he is convinced their home country is about to start a war. It is completely insane, and that is exactly the point. Things get worse from here because of Butters. One of the hostages tries to make a run for it, and Cartman tells Butters to shoot at him. Butters fires the gun but hits the man in a very specific and very painful spot below the belt. Cartman is furious, not because Butters shot someone, but because of where he shot him. This becomes a running joke throughout the rest of the episode. Every single time Butters fires the gun, he hits someone in the exact same spot. When the police show up to deal with the hostage situation and try to enter the restaurant, Butters fires a warning shot and hits one of the Chinese police officers in the same place. Cartman gets angrier and angrier at Butters for this, even though Cartman is the one who created this entire situation by being racist and paranoid in the first place. While all of this is happening at the restaurant, the Indiana Jones side of the story is playing out at the police station and the district attorney's office. Kyle and his friends go to the Park County District Attorney to try to get Steven Spielberg and George Lucas arrested for what they did to Indiana Jones. The attorney listens to their case, and when he remembers watching the movie himself, he breaks down crying and agrees to help them. They then go to the police station, where one of the detectives also starts crying when he thinks about the film. A warrant is eventually issued, and the police find Spielberg and Lucas at Skywalker Ranch. The two storylines come together at the very end in a way that only South Park could pull off. Back at the restaurant, Cartman has had enough. After Butters shoots yet another person in the same spot, Cartman gives up his entire mission. He decides that even if the Chinese are planning to invade, he cannot continue this operation with Butters constantly shooting people where he should not be shooting them. He surrenders to the police and walks out of the restaurant. As he steps outside, a police officer runs up and announces to everyone that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas have been arrested. All of the cops and all of the hostages immediately break into tears of joy and start hugging each other, celebrating that it's all over. Nobody cares about Cartman's hostage situation anymore. The entire town was apparently more traumatized by a bad Indiana Jones movie than by two kids holding a restaurant at gunpoint. While everyone is crying and celebrating, Cartman and Butters quietly sneak away. In the final moments of the episode, Cartman reflects on everything that happened and says he would rather be Chinese than live in a nation of unethical dick shooters. And Butters, completely unbothered by everything, mentions that he thought the Indiana Jones movie was actually pretty good. It is a perfect ending because Cartman, the most racist character on the show, decides he would rather join the people he has been afraid of than stay in a country that disappointed him. And Butters, the most innocent character on the show, is the only person who enjoyed the movie that traumatized the entire town. Now, the racial angle in this episode is pretty straightforward compared to something like Here Comes the Neighborhood, where the racism was hidden under layers of class commentary. In the China Probrum, there is nothing hidden. Cartman's fear of the Chinese is blatant, open racism based on nothing but the fact that he saw a bunch of Chinese people perform well at the Olympics and decided that meant they were going to take over his country. His plan to infiltrate the Chinese community involves putting on costumes and doing offensive impressions. He walks into a restaurant and harasses a real Chinese family who are just trying to eat dinner. He holds innocent people hostage because of a conspiracy theory that exists only in his own racist mind. The episode does not try to dress any of this up as something other than what it is. What makes the episode interesting from a racial perspective is that the show frames Cartman's behavior as clearly wrong. His friends refuse to help him. Stan literally tells Kyle that this is the point where Kyle usually calls Cartman out for being racist. The Chinese family at the restaurant is depicted as perfectly normal people who are rightfully annoyed by Cartman's behavior. The father calls out the boys for pretending to be Chinese stereotypes. The restaurant staff asks them to leave. The police show up to stop Cartman, not to help him. Nobody in the episode is on Cartman's side except Butters, and Butters only agreed because Cartman scared him into thinking his parents would die. So the episode is using Cartman's racism to make a point about how irrational anti-Chinese fear can be. The idea that watching the Olympics could make someone believe an invasion is happening is so stupid that only Cartman would believe it. But at the same time, the episode leans heavily on Chinese stereotypes in the process. The title itself is a joke about Chinese accents. Cartman and Butters dress in yellowface. The broken English is played for laughs. The whole setup of going to PF. Chang's to find out about an invasion treats the restaurant and its customers as stand-ins for an entire country. So while the show is technically making fun of racism by showing how dumb Cartman is, it is also using real racial stereotypes as the vehicle for its comedy. That is the line South Park has always walked, and this episode walks it about as closely as any episode in the series. The episode was the mid-season premiere for season 12 and was dedicated to Isaac Hayes, the voice actor behind Chef, who had died in August of that year. It was also the first South Park episode ever produced in widescreen and high definition, even though it originally aired in the standard format. The episode drew controversy mostly for the Indiana Jones scenes rather than the Chinese content, but the racial elements were not ignored. Critics noted that the episode was uncomfortable in its portrayal of Chinese people and featured some of the most obvious Asian stereotyping in the show's history. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously, but PF, Chang's was not the first or last time South Park built an entire episode around making fun of Asian restaurant owners, because there is one character who might be the single most stereotypical Asian character in the entire history of American television, and his name is Tong-Lu Kim, the owner of City Walk, whose broken English and exaggerated mannerisms became a running joke that lasted for over a decade before the show finally revealed a twist that nobody saw coming. City Sushi, the most stereotypical Asian character on television, gets a shocking twist. So we just talked about Cartman dressing up in a Chinese costume and doing a fake accent at a PF Chang's for one episode. But South Park had a character who did basically the same thing for almost a decade straight and nobody in the town ever noticed. Season 15, episode 6, titled City Sushi, first aired on June 1st, 2011, and it contains one of the most genuinely shocking twists in the entire history of this show. But before we get to the twist, we need to talk about the character at the center of it all, Tong-Lu Kim, the owner of the local Chinese restaurant City Walk, who had been appearing on South Park since all the way back in season 6. Tong-Lu Kim first showed up in the season 6 episode Jared Has AIDS. From the very first moment he appeared on screen, his entire character was built around one thing, a wildly exaggerated Chinese accent. He would say city in a way that sounded like a curse word. He would replace certain sounds with others. He would mispronounce words constantly, and over the years, he kept showing up again and again. In Child Abduction Is Not Funny, the town hired him to build a wall around South Park to keep out kidnappers, and he spent the whole episode fighting off Mongolians who kept trying to tear down his wall. That episode alone became one of the most quoted in the show's history. He showed up in other episodes too, always with the same thick accent, always played for laughs. For 9 seasons, Tong-Lu Kim was just the funny Chinese restaurant guy who talked in a way that made people laugh. Then City Sushi happened and everything changed. The episode starts with Butters handing out flyers for a brand new Japanese restaurant called City Sushi that has just opened right next door to City Walk. Butters gives one of the flyers to Tong-Lu Kim, and Lu Kim immediately loses his mind. He cannot believe that a Japanese restaurant has opened up right next to his Chinese restaurant. He storms into City Sushi and gets into a fight with the owner, a Japanese man named Junichi Takayama. The two of them start yelling at each other, but neither one can understand the other because both of them have such thick accents. Lu Kim's exaggerated Chinese accent clashes with Takayama's exaggerated Japanese accent, and the two of them end up screaming at each other while having no idea what the other person is actually saying. The police show up, and in typical South Park fashion, they blame the whole thing on Butters. They say Butters started an Asian turf war by handing out flyers. Butters gets sent home and grounded by his parents, Steven and Linda, who decide that something must be seriously wrong with their son. Steven says he has no idea what is wrong with Butters, but he knows for sure it is not their parenting because, as he puts it, their parenting is awesome, so they take Butters to see a psychiatrist named Dr. Janus. Now, this is where the episode splits into 2 stories running at the same time. On one side, you have Butters dealing with Dr. Janus. On the other side, you have Lu Kim trying to destroy City Sushi and get rid of Takayama. Let us start with Butters. Dr. Janus sits Butters down and starts asking him questions. Butters, being a normal kid with a normal imagination, tells the doctor about the different characters he likes to pretend to be. He plays firefighter, he plays detective, he plays supervillain, he plays truck driver. This is completely normal behavior for a child his age. But Dr. Janus watches Butters act out these characters and immediately diagnoses him with multiple personality disorder. He tells Butters' parents that their son has serious mental problems and needs ongoing treatment. The joke here is obvious. Butters is just a kid using his imagination the way every kid does, but the adults around him are so clueless that they think he is mentally ill. Meanwhile, Liu Kim is going to war with Takayama. He is furious that everyone in South Park keeps mixing up Chinese and Japanese culture. The town starts referring to the area where both restaurants sit as Little Tokyo, even though Liu Kim's restaurant is Chinese. People call both restaurants Chinese. Nobody in town can tell the difference, or seems to care about the difference between Chinese and Japanese food, culture, or people. This drives Liu Kim absolutely crazy, so Liu Kim comes up with a plan. He pretends to make peace with Takayama and suggests they hold an Asian diversity assembly at the local school. Takayama agrees, thinking it will be a chance to educate people about the differences between their two cultures. But Liu Kim has no intention of making peace. At the assembly, he hijacks the whole thing and starts showing old photographs from Japan's invasion of China during World War II, including images from some of the worst attacks in that conflict. He also puts up a chart that wildly exaggerates Japan's suicide rate. The whole assembly turns into Liu Kim publicly humiliating Takayama and his entire culture in front of the school. Back on Butters' side of the story, things are getting weird, Doctor. Janus keeps switching between different personalities right in front of Butters without realizing it. One minute he is the calm professional doctor. The next minute he is someone completely different with a different voice and different behavior. Butters is confused and scared because the doctor who is supposed to be helping him is clearly the one who actually has the problem. At one point, one of Dr. Janus's personalities forces Butters to help him break into a jewelry store and rob it. But then, mid-robbery, Dr. Janus switches back to his doctor personality and has no memory of what just happened. He sees Butters in the jewelry store and assumes Butters broke in on his own, so he turns Butters over to the police. Butters gets blamed for everything again. Butters, inspired by the movie Paranormal Activity, decides to set up a camera to record himself sleeping so he can figure out what is happening to him at night. When he watches the footage, he sees Dr. Janus sneaking into his bedroom while he sleeps, physically hitting him in the face and urinating on him. Butters is horrified. He confronts Dr. Janus about this, and the doctor immediately switches into a violent personality. Later, one of Dr. Janus's other personalities, a young boy named Billy, appears to Butters and begs for help, saying the doctor is getting worse and worse. Butters goes to Dr. Janus's house looking for answers. Inside, he stumbles into a room that is completely covered in pictures of Takayama, the city sushi owner. The word kill is written in red paint all over the walls, and then Butters finds the truth that changes everything. In that room, Butters discovers that Liu Kim, the Chinese restaurant owner who has been a character on this show for 9 entire seasons, is not a real person. Liu Kim is just another personality of Dr. Janus. Dr. William Janus is a white man. He is not Chinese. He has never been Chinese. For years, this white man with severe mental health problems has been squinting his eyes, putting on a fake Chinese accent, and running a Chinese restaurant, and nobody in the entire town of South Park ever noticed that the Chinese restaurant owner was actually a white guy. This is the twist that shocked everyone who watched this episode. A character who had been on the show since season 6, who appeared in multiple episodes across 9 seasons, who was always presented as a Chinese man with a heavy accent, turned out to be a white psychiatrist with a mental health condition all along. The name Dr. Janus was a clue the entire time, named after the Roman god Janus, who is always shown with 2 faces. But the episode is not done yet. Liu Kim, still operating as one of Dr. Janus's personalities, apologizes to Takayama again and proposes an Asian diversity festival as a peace offering. He builds a tall tower between the 2 restaurants that he calls the Tower of Peace and invites Takayama to come to the top. But his real plan is to push Takayama off the tower and make it look like a suicide, because as Liu Kim puts it, that is what Japanese people do when they feel shame, so nobody would question it. Butters contacts the police just in time. They arrive at the festival as Liu Kim is trying to push Takayama off the tower. Right there, in front of the entire town, Dr. Janus starts switching between his different personalities for everyone to see. The people of South Park finally realize that their Chinese restaurant owner has been a white man this whole time. When Takayama learns that the man he has been fighting with is not actually Chinese but a white guy pretending to be Chinese, Takayama is overcome with shame. He says he has brought dishonor on himself for not being able to tell the difference between a real Chinese man and a white man doing an impression. Even as he is about to jump, Takayama yells out, "No! This is racial stereotype!" acknowledging that what he is about to do is exactly the kind of stereotype that the whole episode has been making fun of. He jumps anyway and lands on the city sushi building, destroying it completely. The ending of the episode is maybe the darkest punchline in the whole series. The police arrest Dr. Janus and learn the full truth about all of his personalities. Butters is praised as a hero for figuring everything out. But then the police make a decision that perfectly captures everything South Park has ever said about how people deal with uncomfortable racial truths. They decide to let the Tong Lu Kim personality keep running City Walk because it is the only Chinese restaurant in town and they do not want to lose it. They would rather have a white man with a mental condition pretending to be Chinese and serving Chinese food than have no Chinese food at all. The convenience matters more to them than the truth. The very last scene copies the ending of the famous horror movie Psycho Shot for Shot. Lu Kim sits alone in a cell, wrapped in a blanket, and says he will show everyone he is fine because he would not even hurt a fly. Then Doctor. Janus's face flashes over Lu Kim's face, just like the ending of Psycho, followed by a final shot of City Walk. What makes City Sushi so important in the conversation about South Park and race is that it took one of the show's most racially stereotypical characters and revealed that the stereotype was the point all along. Tong Lu Kim's accent never sounded like an actual Chinese accent because it was never supposed to. It was a white man's idea of what a Chinese person sounds like. The broken English, the squinted eyes, the mispronounced words, all of it was a performance by a mentally ill white man, and the fact that nobody in town could tell the difference says more about how Americans view Asian people than any straightforward joke ever could. But even though the show pulled off this clever twist, it also spent 9 seasons using that same stereotype for cheap laughs before revealing the deeper meaning. And the reveal did not stop the show from continuing to use Lu Kim in later episodes, still with the same accent and the same jokes. So the question remains whether the twist was a brilliant commentary on racial stereotypes in media, or just a clever way to justify years of using those same stereotypes for comedy. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Either way, City Sushi dealt with stereotypes by revealing they were fake from the start. But the next episode on our list takes a completely different approach by building an entire museum dedicated to them, forcing kids to walk through a hall of every offensive stereotype imaginable, and using that museum to make a point about tolerance. That nobody in the episode actually understands. The death camp of tolerance. When being tolerant goes way too far. So City Sushi revealed that one of South Park's most stereotypical characters was actually a white man pretending to be Chinese the entire time. That episode used its twist to comment on how easily people accept racial stereotypes without questioning them. But before City Sushi even aired, South Park made an episode that attacked the whole idea of tolerance itself, arguing that people have become so desperate to look open-minded that they will accept literally anything, no matter how insane, just to avoid being called a bigot. Season 6, Episode 14, The Death Camp of Tolerance, first aired on November 20th, 2002, and it might be the most important episode on this entire list when it comes to understanding how South Park thinks about race, stereotypes, and the way society handles both. The episode starts with Mr. Garrison getting called into Principal Victoria's office. He has been teaching kindergarten for 2 seasons at this point after being demoted because he openly admitted to being gay. But now the school wants him back as the 4th grade teacher. Principal Victoria tells him he is being promoted back to his old position. At first, Garrison is happy about this, but then something clicks in his head. If the school fires him for being gay, he can sue for $25 million in damages. So instead of being a good teacher, Garrison hatches a plan to behave so outrageously in class that the school will have no choice but to fire him. Then he will take them to court and get rich. Garrison's plan involves his new partner, a man named Mr. Slave, who shows up for the very first time in this episode. Garrison introduces Mr. Slave to the class as his new teaching assistant. He tells the kids that the short version of teaching assistant is teacher's ass. This is the first sign that things are about to go very wrong. From this moment on, Garrison and Mr. Slave start doing increasingly shocking things in front of the 4th grade class. They are not subtle about it at all. Garrison is doing everything in his power to make the kids uncomfortable, to make the school uncomfortable, to make everyone so uncomfortable that they will fire him for being gay and he can cash in. And here is the thing. It works on the kids immediately. Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and the rest of the class are horrified by what they are seeing. They go home and tell their parents that their teacher is doing crazy things in the classroom. But instead of listening to what the kids are actually saying, the parents hear something completely different. They think their children are being mean to their gay teacher. They think their kids are being homophobic. Without even asking what specifically is happening in the classroom, the parents decide that their children need to learn a lesson about accepting people who are different. So the parents take the boys to the Museum of Tolerance. This is where the episode starts connecting to the bigger theme of race and stereotypes that runs through this whole video. The Museum of Tolerance is a real place in Los Angeles, but in the South Park version, it is a building filled with exhibits about how wrong it is to make fun of people based on their race, religion, gender, or anything else. A tour guide walks the parents and kids through the museum, showing them displays about racial slurs, about how hurtful stereotypes can be, and about the importance of accepting everyone for who they are. The parents nod along the whole time, feeling good about teaching their children this lesson, but then, at the very end of the museum tour, a man is caught smoking outside the building. The tour guide, who just spent an hour teaching everyone about tolerance and acceptance, immediately starts screaming at this man for smoking. She calls him disgusting and terrible. All of the parents who just learned about not judging people instantly join in, yelling at the smoker and treating him like garbage. They have literally just walked through a museum about not judging people, and the second they step outside, they judge someone for a personal choice. The hypocrisy is so obvious that the kids notice it right away, but the adults are completely blind to what they are doing. Back at school, things get much worse, Mr. Garrison decides to escalate his plan by conducting what he calls a science experiment. He takes the class pet, a gerbil named Lemmywinks, and inserts the animal into Mr. Slave's body in an extremely disturbing way. The kids are traumatized. Even Cartman, who is usually the most offensive person in any room, is horrified by what he just watched. The boys know that what their teacher is doing is wrong, and they know it has nothing to do with him being gay. It is just a teacher behaving in a completely unacceptable way in front of children. The boys go to Chef, the school cafeteria worker who is usually the only adult in South Park who actually makes sense. They tell Chef what happened and ask if they are being homophobic for feeling uncomfortable. Chef tells them no. He explains that there is a huge difference between being uncomfortable around gay people because they are gay and being uncomfortable because a teacher is doing insane things in a classroom. Chef understands immediately that the kids are right and that Garrison needs to be stopped. So Chef goes to Principal Victoria to report what Garrison is doing. But instead of listening to Chef, the school sends him to a tolerance seminar. The same thing that happened with the parents happens with Chef. The adults in charge are so terrified of being called intolerant that they would rather punish the people complaining than actually investigate what is going on. Nobody wants to be the person who fires a gay teacher, no matter what that teacher is doing, because they are all afraid of looking like bigots. When the boys stop showing up to class because they refuse to sit through any more of Garrison's behavior, Mr. Mackey, the school counselor, decides that the kids need serious help. He tells the parents about a place called Tolerance Camp, which he describes as an intensive program that will teach the children to accept people who are different from them. The parents agree to send their kids there immediately. This is where the episode gets dark. Tolerance Camp is designed to look exactly like a concentration camp. The scenes inside the camp are filmed in black and white as a direct reference to the movie Schindler's List, which told the story of the real horrors that happened during the Holocaust. The kids are marched through gates, given work assignments, and forced to do arts and crafts under the watchful eye of a harsh camp warden. They have to paint pictures of people of different races while guards stand over them and yell. They are worked to the bone and barely fed. The whole thing is designed to look like one of the worst places in human history, except instead of being punished for their religion or their race, these kids are being punished for not wanting to watch their teacher do insane things in a classroom. The name of the episode itself, The Death Camp of Tolerance, is the entire joke. It takes the concept of a death camp, which is one of the most horrifying things in human history, and pairs it with the word tolerance, which is supposed to be one of the most positive words in our language. By smashing those two things together, the episode is saying that when tolerance becomes mandatory, when you are not allowed to object to anything without being labeled a bigot, then tolerance stops being a good thing and becomes its own kind of cruelty. While the kids are suffering in the camp, two other things are happening. First, Mr. Garrison is getting more and more frustrated because no matter what he does, nobody will fire him. Instead of getting in trouble, he keeps getting praised. The school decides to give him a Courageous Teacher Award at a ceremony at the Museum of Tolerance for overcoming the challenges of being a gay teacher. Sharon tells Randy she is ashamed of Stan for being intolerant. The adults have completely lost the plot. A man is doing objectively terrible things in a classroom, and the response is to give him a trophy. The second thing happening is the Lemmiwinks subplot. After being placed inside Mr. Slave's body, the little gerbil has to find his way out. The show follows Lemmiwinks on this journey like it is an epic adventure story. He travels through different parts of Mr. Slave's body, meeting the ghosts of 3 animals who died trying to make the same escape: a frog king, a sparrow prince, and a katata fish. These ghost animals give Lemmiwinks advice and encouragement, and a song plays throughout his journey that is a direct spoof of the music from the 1977 animated version of The Hobbit. Trey Parker and Matt Stone later said that Lemmiwinks was their version of Frodo from Lord of the Rings, a character who does not really do much on his own but survives by following the instructions of others. At the awards ceremony, Mr. Garrison finally loses it. He appears on stage with Mr. Slave and behaves in the most over-the-top way possible, making it absolutely clear to everyone that he has been trying to get fired this entire time. He screams at the audience and says something that becomes the most important line in the entire episode. He says that just because you have to tolerate something does not mean you have to approve of it. He points out that if you had to like it, the place would be called the Museum of Acceptance, not the Museum of Tolerance. Tolerating something means you put up with it even though you do not like it, and that is completely different from pretending everything is fine when it is clearly not. This is the moment where the parents finally realize what has been happening. Their kids were not being homophobic, their kids were trying to tell them that their teacher was behaving inappropriately, and the parents were so worried about appearing tolerant that they punished their own children instead of listening to them. They rush to the tolerance camp and find their kids malnourished, exhausted, and barely standing, looking like survivors of something terrible. The parents apologize, but the damage has already been done. Principal Victoria decides that Mr. Garrison and Mr. Slave are the ones who are actually intolerant, accusing them of being intolerant of their own identities. She sends them to the tolerance camp instead, as Mr. Slave arrives at the camp. He coughs up Lemmiwinks, who has survived the entire journey through his body. The 3 ghost animals appear one final time, crown Lemmiwinks the Gerbil King, and his adventure song plays over the credits. Now here is why this episode matters so much to a conversation about South Park and race. The Museum of Tolerance is full of exhibits about racial stereotypes, about slurs, about the harm caused by judging people based on their skin color or background. All of that content is treated as important and real within the episode. The show is not saying that racial tolerance is bad. It is not saying that museums about stereotypes are stupid. What the show is saying is that tolerance has become a weapon. When the word intolerant can be used to shut down any complaint, even a completely valid one, then the concept of tolerance has been twisted into something that actually causes harm. The parents in this episode are so afraid of being called racist or homophobic that they would rather send their own children to a prison camp than risk looking like bad people. The episode aired in 2002, but a lot of people have pointed out that its message feels even more relevant today than it did back then. The idea that being overly focused on appearing tolerant can actually prevent people from addressing real problems is something that comes up constantly in modern conversations about race, identity, and culture. South Park was making that argument over 20 years ago, and whether you agree with the show's take or not, you have to admit that it was ahead of its time in identifying a tension that a lot of people are still arguing about right now. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while the Death Camp of Tolerance used a museum full of stereotypes to make its point about how society handles race, the next episode on our list took a completely different approach by comparing college basketball to something much darker, drawing a direct line between the way universities profit from their athletes and one of the most shameful chapters in American history. Crack Baby Athletic Association. Cartman compares college sports to slavery. So the Death Camp of Tolerance showed us what happens when society becomes so obsessed with looking open-minded that it punishes the people who actually see what is going on. That episode used a concentration camp as its extreme comparison. But the next episode on our list makes a comparison that is just as dark, just as uncomfortable, and way more connected to a real debate that was happening in America at the time it aired. Season 15, Episode 5, Crack Baby Athletic Association, first aired on May 25th, 2011, and it draws a direct line between the way colleges make money from their athletes and the way plantation owners made money from the people they enslaved. And it does this by having Cartman literally dress up as a slave owner and walk into a university to ask for business advice. The episode starts with Stan and Kyle watching an episode of Terrence and Phillip on television. A commercial comes on featuring Sarah McLachlan, the real singer who is famous for those incredibly sad commercials about abused animals. But in this version, the commercial is not about animals. It is about babies who were born addicted to crack because their mothers used drugs during pregnancy. The commercial is designed to be the saddest thing you have ever seen, with McLachlan's voice playing over images of sick babies, begging viewers to donate money to help them. Kyle is so moved by the commercial that he decides to go volunteer at the Colorado Medical Center to help take care of these babies. When Kyle gets to the hospital, he finds Cartman already there. Cartman is wearing a nice shirt and tie and carrying a video camera. Kyle is immediately suspicious because Cartman has never volunteered for anything good in his entire life. He asks Cartman what he is really doing there. Cartman says he is just helping the children. Kyle asks again. Cartman says it again. Kyle does not believe him for a second, so he follows Cartman out of the hospital ward and into a back room where the truth is revealed. Cartman has set up an office with Craig, Clyde, and Butters. They have been filming the crack babies and editing the footage together. Their business idea is simple and horrible. They take babies who are addicted to crack, put them together in a room, and place a ball filled with crack in the middle. The babies, because of their addiction, fight each other trying to get to the ball. Cartman films this, edits it to look like a basketball game, and broadcasts it on the internet. He calls his company the Crack Baby Athletic Association, or the CBAA, and he is already making serious money from it. Kyle is horrified. He tells Cartman that what he is doing is disgusting and that he is going to report him. But then Cartman does what Cartman always does. He starts talking about money. He shows Kyle how much the CBAA has made in a very short amount of time. He tells Kyle that they need someone to handle the money, and since Kyle is Jewish, he is obviously the best person for the job. This is a classic Cartman move, using a racial stereotype as a backhanded compliment to get what he wants. And the worst part is that it works. Kyle looks at the numbers, thinks about it, and against his better judgment, he joins the CBAA as its accountant. This is where the episode starts hitting its real target. Kyle knows that what they are doing is wrong. He knows that making money off of sick babies is terrible, but he keeps finding ways to justify it to himself. He goes to Stan and tries to explain why the CBAA is actually a good thing. He says things like the babies are going to be sick whether they film them or not, so they might as well make money and use some of it to help them. He says they are not the ones who got these babies addicted to drugs. That is their mother's fault. He keeps making excuses, and with each excuse, Stan just stares at him in silence. At one point, Stan flat out tells Kyle that he sounds exactly like Cartman. Kyle tries to argue back, but ends up saying something in exactly the same way Cartman would say it, then catches himself and covers his mouth in horror. It is one of the funniest and most disturbing moments in the episode because it shows how easily a good person can talk themselves into doing bad things when money is involved. The business keeps growing, and the group decides they want to take it to the next level by cutting a deal with EA Sports to make a video game based on the CBAA. But Kyle starts feeling guilty about selling the babies' images to a video game company without giving the babies anything in return. He tells Cartman that they need to figure out a way to pay the athletes. Cartman insists that the CBAA is a non-profit and that paying the babies is not how things work. But Kyle pushes back, so Cartman promises to look into how other organizations get away with making huge amounts of money off their athletes without paying them. This leads to the most talked about scene in the entire episode. Cartman dresses up as a 19th century southern plantation owner. He puts on a white suit, a wide-brimmed hat, and starts speaking in a thick southern accent. He walks into the University of Colorado Boulder and introduces himself to the dean by saying his name is Eric P. Cartman and that he is a well-respected owner in the slave trade. He says he has come to talk business because the university, like him, makes a lot of money from its slaves. The dean has no idea what Cartman is talking about. Cartman walks over to a picture of the university's basketball team and says they have some mighty strong-looking workers. He keeps calling the student athletes slaves throughout the entire conversation. He asks the dean how the university gets around paying its slaves. He uses the phrase student athletes and then immediately laughs at how clever a trick that name is. The dean is furious and keeps telling Cartman that the university does not own slaves. Cartman winks and nods like they are both in on the same secret. When Cartman asks directly how the university avoids paying its student athletes, the dean throws him out of the office. The entire scene is played for laughs, but the comparison underneath it is dead serious. In 2011, when this episode aired, the NCAA was making billions of dollars from college sports, especially basketball and football. The athletes who generated all of that money through ticket sales, television deals, merchandise, and video games were not paid a single dollar. They received scholarships to attend the university, but they could not earn any money from their own talent, their own name, or their own image. Cartman's comparison to slavery is obviously extreme and offensive, but the episode is using that extreme comparison to force people to think about just how unfair the system really was. Kyle, still wanting to do the right thing even though he is neck deep in a terrible business, comes up with a plan. He tells Cartman that they should take 30% of the money from the EA Sports deal and use it to build a state-of-the-art orphanage for the crack babies. That way, the babies get something out of the deal, and the CBAA looks good to the public. Cartman, to Kyle's complete surprise, actually agrees. Not because he cares about the babies, but because he realizes that building an orphanage would be great for public relations and make the CBAA look like a charitable organization instead of what it really is. Even when Cartman does something that looks good on the surface, his reasons are always selfish. While all of this is happening, there is a side story running through the episode about the rock guitarist Slash. Craig and Clyde are trying to book Slash to play a halftime show at one of the CBAA games. They spend the whole episode trying to track him down, but cannot find him anywhere. Eventually, they discover the truth. In the world of South Park, Slash is not a real person. He is a made-up character based on an old Dutch legend called Vanterslouch. According to this legend, parents dress up in a top hat and wig and pretend to be Slash to bring joy to children, the same way parents dress up as Santa Claus. Craig and Clyde are devastated when they find out that the Slash who played at Cartman's birthday party years ago was just somebody's dad in a costume. The CBAA story comes to its final twist when the boys finally sit down with the head of EA Sports to sign their video game deal. The EA Sports executive is portrayed as a cigar-smoking, bourbon-drinking southern businessman, basically the same type of character Cartman was pretending to be at the university. When the deal is signed, the boys learn that the contract gives EA Sports complete ownership of the Crack Baby Athletic Association and all of its revenue. EA takes everything, the boys get nothing. The executive tells them to get out of his building. It is the show's way of saying that the same thing happening to the crack babies, being used for profit without getting paid, just happened to Cartman and his friends. The people at the top always win, and the people doing the actual work always lose. Kyle is crushed because his dream of building the orphanage is now dead. The money is gone. The business is gone. Everything was taken by a bigger, more powerful company, but in the final scene, Stan and Kyle walk past the spot where the orphanage was supposed to be built, and to their shock, it is actually under construction. Someone is building it. They walk inside and find a top hat and a guitar sitting in the corner. The episode ends with the suggestion that maybe Slash is real after all, and that he used his own money to build the orphanage that Kyle wanted. It is a weird, sweet ending to an episode that spent 20 minutes comparing college sports to slavery and filming babies fighting over drugs. The reason Crack Baby Athletic Association belongs on this list is because of the slavery comparison. Cartman walking into a real university dressed as a plantation owner and calling student athletes slaves was one of the most shocking things the show had ever done, even by South Park standards. The episode forced viewers to think about the fact that the NCAA was making billions from athletes who were mostly black in sports like basketball and football without paying them anything. The comparison to slavery was intentionally over the top, but it worked because it made people uncomfortable enough to actually think about the issue. And 10 years after this episode aired, the Supreme Court ruled in a landmark case that the NCAA could no longer stop athletes from being paid for their name, image, and likeness. The exact thing Cartman was mocking the university for in 2011 was officially struck down in 2021. The episode also worked as a story about how money corrupts good people. Kyle started the episode wanting to help sick babies and ended up running a company that used them for profit. The line between doing good and doing harm turned out to be a lot thinner than Kyle thought, and watching him slowly become the thing he hated was one of the most effective character moments in the entire season. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously, but comparing college sports to slavery was not the most controversial racial comparison South Park ever made, because the next episode on our list took on one of the most heated and painful real-life events in recent American history, the shooting of Trayvon Martin, and turned it into a zombie movie starring Cartman as the hero trying to save the world from what he called a very specific kind of threat. World War Zimmerman. Cartman turns the Trayvon Martin case into a zombie movie, so Crack Baby Athletic Association compared college sports to slavery and let Cartman walk into a university dressed as a plantation owner. That was shocking, but at least it was making fun of a broken system. The next episode on our list took aim at something way more raw, way more personal, and way more painful for millions of Americans. Season 17, Episode 3, World War Zimmerman, first aired on October 9th, 2013, just 3 months after the real-life verdict in the George Zimmerman trial that divided the entire country. This episode takes the shooting of Trayvon Martin, the anger over the not guilty verdict, and the controversial Stand Your Ground law and turns all of it into a zombie apocalypse movie starring Cartman as the hero. And it is exactly as uncomfortable as that sounds. To understand why this episode hit so hard, you need to know what was happening in America at the time. In February 2012, a 17-year-old black teenager named Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by a neighborhood watch volunteer named George Zimmerman in Sanford, Florida. Zimmerman claimed he acted in self-defense under Florida's Stand Your Ground law, which says a person can use deadly force if they reasonably believe their life is in danger, even if they could have walked away from the situation. In July 2013, Zimmerman was found not guilty. The verdict set off a wave of protests and outrage across the country, with millions of people arguing that Martin was killed simply for being a black teenager in a neighborhood where someone decided he did not belong. It was one of the most racially charged events in modern American history, and South Park aired this episode just weeks later. The episode opens at school, where Cartman is acting strange. He is being unusually nice to Tolkien Black, the only black kid in their class. He is complimenting Tolkien, trying to make small talk, asking him to hang out, and even asking for a fist bump. Stan, Kyle, and Kenny are watching this happen with total confusion. Kyle asks, is he doing it again? Because this is clearly not the first time Cartman has done this recently. Tolkien gives Cartman a weird look and walks away. The reason for Cartman's strange behavior becomes clear almost immediately. He is not being nice because he likes Tolkien. He is being nice because he is terrified of Tolkien. Cartman has been having recurring nightmares about the Zimmerman verdict, and in these nightmares, he has cast himself as Brad Pitt's character from the 2013 movie World War Z. In the film, Brad Pitt plays a man named Jerry who has to survive a global zombie outbreak. In Cartman's version of the dream, everything starts the same way. He has a wife and 2 daughters. They eat breakfast while CNN reports that a verdict is coming soon in the Trayvon Martin case. Jerry offers to take the kids to school. They get stuck in traffic and turn on the radio. A news bulletin announces that George Zimmerman has been found not guilty, and that is when the zombies attack. Except in Cartman's nightmare, the zombies are not undead monsters, they are black people. The moment the not guilty verdict is announced, every black person in the dream becomes enraged and starts attacking everyone around them, climbing up buildings and swarming through the streets exactly like the zombies in World War Z. Cartman's dream family tries to escape by climbing to the rooftops, but the mob follows them up. At the top of the building, they run into Tolkien, who lunges at Cartman. That is when Cartman wakes up screaming. This is Cartman's entire worldview laid out in a dream. He genuinely believes that black people are going to riot and destroy everything because of the Zimmerman verdict, and he believes that Tolkien, as the only black kid he knows, is a ticking time bomb who could snap at any moment. He tells all of this to Mr. Mackey, the school counselor, who does not really understand the situation, but decides that Cartman needs to resolve his feud with Tolkien. Mr. Mackey brings Tolkien into his office so that Cartman can tell him what he needs to say. Cartman completely seriously tells Tolkien that he was not on the jury that acquitted Zimmerman. Tolkien has absolutely no idea what Cartman is talking about. He was not thinking about the Zimmerman case. He was not angry. He was not plotting revenge. He was just a kid going to school. But Cartman cannot see that. In Cartman's mind, every black person in America is furious about the verdict and ready to explode. Cartman then reads Tolkien a poem he wrote called "I Was Not the Bullet." The poem is Cartman's way of telling Tolkien that he is not responsible for what happened to Trayvon Martin and that Tolkien should not blame him or seek revenge. Tolkien is confused and annoyed because, again, he was never angry at Cartman about the Zimmerman case in the first place, but Cartman does not stop there. At a school assembly, with cheerleaders performing and Butters beatboxing, Cartman gets on stage and raps a version of "I Was Not the Bullet" in front of the entire school. This is the final straw for Tolkien. He stands up and yells at Cartman, not because of the Zimmerman verdict, but because Cartman has been harassing him for days about something that was never an issue. Tolkien is angry at Cartman for being racist, not angry at society for the verdict. But Cartman sees Tolkien yelling and interprets it as the beginning of the apocalypse. In his mind, the outbreak has started, Tolkien has snapped, and the zombie uprising is here. Cartman runs home, grabs a handgun, and puts on the same outfit Brad Pitt wore in World War Z. He runs out into the street screaming that there is an outbreak and that everyone needs to evacuate. He stops a woman driving a Tesla who turns out to be Nellie's mom and forces her to drive him to the airport. What follows is one of the most chaotic sequences in South Park history. Cartman gets on an airplane and tells all the passengers that there is an outbreak and that they need to fly to Iceland, which is where the characters in World War Z went to find safety. When Cartman goes to the bathroom to think, he finds a black man inside. Terrified, Cartman blocks the door and tells the passengers that one of them is in the bathroom. The passengers panic. One person is so scared of becoming a zombie that he opens the emergency exit and gets sucked out of the plane. When the black passenger finally gets out of the bathroom, a flight attendant tries to shoot him. The bullet misses, bounces around the cabin, and causes an explosion that crashes the plane into the Rocky Mountains. Hundreds of people die because Cartman saw a black man in an airplane bathroom. Only 3 people survive the crash: Cartman, Nellie's mom, and the pilot, who is fatally injured. Before he dies, the pilot tells Cartman that to stop the outbreak, he has to find and kill Patient Zero, the person it all starts from. Cartman decides that Patient Zero is Tolkien. He has to kill Tolkien to save the world, so Cartman and Nellie's mom head to Jimbo's gun store to buy a rifle, but Jimbo explains the stand your ground law to them. He tells Cartman that in certain states, you can shoot someone if you feel threatened, but only if the person comes to you. You cannot just go to someone's house and shoot them. This gives Cartman a new idea. Instead of killing Tolkien, he decides to kill George Zimmerman. In Cartman's twisted logic, if Zimmerman is dead, then the verdict does not matter anymore, and black people will stop rioting, which means Tolkien will not become a zombie. So Cartman and Nellie's mom rush to another airplane to fly to Florida. On the plane, the same thing happens again. Cartman sees a black passenger, panics, and causes the plane to crash a second time. The show uses this running joke to make a point about how Cartman's racism causes way more destruction than anything the black people in the episode actually do. Every time Cartman tries to save people, he ends up killing hundreds of innocent bystanders. They eventually make it to Florida. Nellie's mom starts thanking Cartman for everything he is doing to save the world and is immediately hit and killed by a truck. Cartman is now alone. He goes to George Zimmerman's house, but he cannot just knock on the door and shoot the man because that would not count as self-defense. So Cartman comes up with possibly the darkest plan in the episode. He paints his face black and puts on a dark hoodie, making himself look like the description that was used to profile Trayvon Martin on the night he was killed. Cartman deliberately makes himself look like a black teenager so that Zimmerman will feel threatened and shoot him, which would then get Zimmerman arrested because Cartman is actually white. It works. Zimmerman sees a figure in a dark hoodie on his lawn, feels threatened, and shoots. Government agents who are watching tell Zimmerman that he did what he had to do, but then one of them checks and realizes the kid is not black. He is white. The moment the agents discover that Zimmerman shot a white kid, everything changes. Zimmerman is immediately put on trial, found guilty, and executed by electric chair, not once, but 6 times. The episode is making the point as bluntly as possible. When Zimmerman shot a black teenager in real life, he was found not guilty. In the show, when he shoots a white kid, he is convicted and killed almost instantly. The message is clear. The justice system treated Trayvon Martin's life as less valuable because of his race. With Zimmerman dead, the outbreak is declared over. Back in South Park, Cartman finds Tolkien on the street and apologizes. Tolkien is furious about everything Cartman has put him through, the poems, the rapping, being called Patient Zero. Cartman tries to calm Tolkien down and asks him for a fist bump to show that everything is fine between them. Tolkien, still angry but trying to move past it, starts walking toward Cartman, but Cartman has spray painted a red circle on the ground around himself. The moment Tolkien steps into the circle, Cartman pulls out his gun and shoots him, claiming that Tolkien entered his space and that he was standing his ground. Tolkien lies on the ground and Cartman adjusts his body to make sure he is inside the circle, staging the scene to match his self-defense claim. It is one of the most shocking endings in South Park history. Cartman has just done to Tolkien what Zimmerman did to Trayvon Martin. He created a situation where he could claim he felt threatened, then used a law designed to protect people as an excuse to shoot a black person who was never actually a threat. The episode does not end with a speech or a lesson. It just ends with Tolkien on the ground and Cartman standing over him. The silence says everything. Trey Parker later said that the writers considered making Tolkien's death permanent in this episode, but decided against it because they loved having the character around. Parker also noted that this was one of the few episodes his own father said he did not understand, which Parker believed was because his father had not seen the movie World War Z and missed the structure of the parody. IGN gave the episode an 8.7 out of 10, calling it a return to form for the show and praising how it walked the line between being funny and being genuinely disturbing. What makes World War Zimmerman so effective is that the episode never lets Cartman be right about anything. His fears about black people rioting are shown to be completely made up in his own head. Tolkien is never angry about the verdict. The black people on the airplanes are just regular passengers going about their day. Every single act of violence in the episode is caused by Cartman and the white people around him reacting to threats that do not exist. The episode is saying that the real danger is not black people being angry. The real danger is white people being afraid of black people being angry and the terrible things they do because of that fear. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while World War Zimmerman used a zombie movie to talk about racial fear and the justice system, the next episode on our list tackled racial bias from a completely different angle, one where the racism did not come from fear or paranoia, but from something that seemed almost innocent on the surface. A kid trying to play matchmaker because he thought two people belonged together based on nothing but the color of their skin. Cartman finds love, racist matchmaking, and the idea that black people belong together. So World War Zimmerman showed us Cartman at his most paranoid and his most dangerous, turning the Trayvon Martin case into a zombie apocalypse because he genuinely believed black people were about to destroy the world. That episode was dark, violent, and disturbing, but the next episode on our list takes Cartman's racism in a completely different direction. Instead of fear and violence, this one is about something that almost looks sweet on the surface. Almost. Season 16, Episode 7, Cartman Finds Love, first aired on April 25th, 2012, and it is the episode where Cartman decides to play matchmaker, not because he cares about love, but because he believes that black people should only date other black people. The episode begins at South Park Elementary, where a new girl named Nicole has just transferred to the school and joined the cheerleading squad. All the boys are crowding around the gym to get a look at her. But the moment Cartman sees that Nicole is black, his brain goes to one place and one place only. He immediately walks up to Tolkien Black, the only black boy in the school, and congratulates him. Tolkien has no idea what Cartman is talking about and walks away annoyed. Cartman watches him go and says with a big smile that Tolkien must just be shy. From this moment on, Cartman makes it his personal mission to get Tolkien and Nicole together. Not because he thinks they would be a good couple, not because they have anything in common, not because either one of them has expressed any interest in the other. The only reason Cartman wants them together is because they are both black, and in Cartman's mind, that means they belong together. It is racism disguised as romance. Cartman genuinely believes he is doing a good thing by making sure the two black kids in town end up as a couple, and he cannot understand why anyone would see a problem with that. In Mr. Garrison's class, Cartman positions himself between Tolkien and Nicole and keeps trying to get Tolkien to talk to her. Tolkien ignores him completely, so Cartman takes matters into his own hands. He goes to the girls and tells them, acting as Tolkien's messenger, that Tolkien likes Nicole but is too shy to say anything and that Nicole should make the first move. The girls take this information to a sleepover at Babe's house, where they are playing a board game and talking about boys. They tell Nicole that Tolkien likes her, but Nicole tells them something that throws a wrench into Cartman's entire plan. She does not like Tolkien. She has a crush on Kyle. This is the worst possible outcome for Cartman. A black girl liking a white boy, and not just any white boy, but Kyle, the Jewish kid Cartman has been tormenting for years, goes against everything Cartman believes about how the world should work. He cannot let this happen. So Cartman comes up with a lie. He tells Nicole and the other girls that he and Kyle are actually a gay couple. The rumor spreads through the school like wildfire. Suddenly, every girl in the hallway is whispering and smiling at Kyle, treating him like their new best friend because they think he is gay. Kyle has absolutely no idea what is going on or why the girls are acting differently around him. With Kyle out of the picture, Cartman moves forward with his plan to get Tolkien and Nicole together. His method is extreme, even by Cartman's standards. He lures Nicole into the boys' locker room where Tolkien happens to be, wrapped in a towel after a shower. Then Cartman chain locks the doors from the outside, trapping both of them inside overnight. Inside the locked locker room, Tolkien and Nicole find a deli platter, massage oil, board games, and grape soda that Cartman left for them. Tolkien does his best to comfort Nicole, who is scared about being trapped. The next morning, firemen come and cut the chain lock to free them. As they walk out, Nicole thanks Tolkien for being so kind to her and suggests they have lunch together the next day. Cartman watches them from the bushes with tears in his eyes. This is where the episode introduces one of its funniest and strangest elements. Cartman starts talking to Cupid Me, a tiny imaginary version of himself dressed as a cupid, complete with wings, a diaper, and a little bow and arrow. Nobody else can see Cupid Me. He only exists in Cartman's head. The two of them congratulate each other on successfully getting Tolkien and Nicole together, and from this point on, Cartman spies on the couple as they go on dates, visit amusement parks, and spend time together. He even plants teddy bears on both of their doorsteps to make it look like they are giving each other gifts. Meanwhile, Kyle finally finds out about the gay rumor. All the girls have been whispering about him, and he eventually discovers that Cartman told everyone they are a couple. Kyle is furious. He finds Cartman on the playground and pushes him to the ground, demanding that he tell everyone the truth. But Cartman shows Kyle how happy Tolkien and Nicole are together, and guilt trips him into staying quiet. If Kyle tells the truth and Nicole finds out Cartman manipulated everything, it could ruin Tolkien and Nicole's relationship. Kyle does not want to hurt Tolkien, so he reluctantly backs off, even though the entire school still thinks he is gay. Here's where the episode adds an extra layer that makes the racial commentary even sharper. Nicole goes home and has dinner with her parents. Her father, William, brings up her new relationship with Tolkien and expresses concern, but his concern is not what you might expect. Nicole's father is also black, and he is worried that his daughter might think she can only date other black people. He tells her that she should not limit herself to dating someone just because they are the same race. Nicole tells her father that Tolkien's race is just a coincidence, and that she did not start dating him because he is black. This scene is important because it shows that even within the black community, people are aware of the pressure and the assumptions that come with interracial dating and same-race dating. Nicole's father wants his daughter to make choices based on who she likes, not on what society or people like Cartman expect her to do. But then Nicole finds the teddy bear that Cartman planted on her doorstep. She thinks it is from Tolkien. She picks it up and reads the tag. One side says, "To my boo." She flips it over. The other side says, "'Cause blacks belong together." This is Cartman's real message, written plainly on a gift tag, and it destroys everything. Nicole is horrified. She thinks Tolkien only likes her because she is black, not because of who she actually is as a person. She breaks up with Tolkien the very next day. Cartman takes the breakup harder than anyone. He is devastated. He lies in bed crying while Butters sits next to him trying to help. When Cupid Me appears, Cartman snaps and beats the imaginary sprite with a baseball bat in a fit of rage. Butters watches in total confusion because all he can see is Cartman screaming and swinging a bat at nothing. While Cartman is falling apart, Kyle sees an opportunity. With Nicole now single, Kyle goes to find Tolkien in the park. Tolkien is sitting on a bench looking sad about the breakup. Kyle walks up and tries to comfort him while also casually asking if Nicole is completely single now. But Tolkien, who still believes the rumor that Kyle is gay, gets up and walks away, telling Kyle that he likes girls. Kyle yells after him in frustration. Cartman eventually pulls himself together after watching a laxative commercial on television. Something about the commercial inspires him. He compares love to a bodily function, telling Butters that sometimes love works itself out on its own, but sometimes you have to give it a push. He opens a box where he has been keeping Cupid Me, who is beaten and bruised from the baseball bat attack. Cartman apologizes and convinces Cupid Me that they still have work to do. He goes to Nicole's house to talk to her, but her father answers the door and tells Cartman that Nicole is out at a Denver Nuggets basketball game with a nice white Jewish boy. Kyle has finally made his move. Cartman races to the arena. When he gets there, he breaks through security and takes over the giant screen in the center of the building. He starts giving a speech about love being hard and how you cannot run away from it just because other people try to get in the way. Then he does something that nobody in the arena sees coming. He looks directly into the camera and tells Kyle that he loves him. The entire arena thinks Cartman is confessing his love for Kyle in front of thousands of people. Cartman then starts singing a love duet with Brad Paisley, the real country music singer who actually voiced himself in this episode. Kyle is mortified. The whole arena is watching what they think is a beautiful moment between two boys in love. After the song ends, Cartman grabs the microphone one more time and announces that the Batmobile is parked outside. Every single person in the arena, including the basketball players, runs out to see it. In the chaos of everyone leaving, Tolkien and Nicole bump into each other. They stop. Nicole tells Tolkien that she thought he only liked her because she was black. Tolkien tells her that he actually avoided talking to her at first, specifically because she was black, because he did not want people to assume they belonged together just because of their race. They both realize they actually like each other for real reasons that have nothing to do with skin color. They decide to get back together and to ignore what other people think about them. Cartman watches from the big screen with tears rolling down his face. In his mind, he won. He got the black kids together, which is all he ever wanted. He does not care that the reason they got back together was the exact opposite of his reason for pushing them together. They reconnected because they chose each other as individuals. Cartman pushed them together because of their race. The episode lets both things be true at the same time without trying to resolve the contradiction, because that contradiction is the whole point. In the final moment, Cupid Me tells Cartman that he has found someone special for Cartman as well. He reveals Stacy Mullenberg, the poster child for Halitosis Kids, an organization for children with extremely bad breath. Cartman screams in horror as Stacy, now smitten with him thanks to Cupid Me's arrow, starts chasing him around the empty arena. It is a fitting ending because Cartman spent the entire episode deciding who other people should be with based on shallow reasons, and now he is stuck with someone chosen for him based on equally shallow logic. What makes Cartman Finds Love one of the most interesting racial episodes in South Park history is that the racism in it does not come from hate. Cartman is not trying to hurt Tolkien or Nicole. He genuinely thinks he is helping them. In his mind, black people dating other black people is just the natural order of things, and he is doing everyone a favor by making sure it happens. This is what makes the episode so effective as commentary. It is not about the obvious, angry, violent kind of racism. It is about the kind of racism that hides behind good intentions, the kind where someone assumes they know what is best for other people based on nothing but the color of their skin. The AV Club gave the episode an A-, praising its sweet core and the way it used Cartman's desire to play Cupid to expose the racism underneath. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Cartman was busy playing matchmaker in South Park, another episode took the show's commentary on race and immigration to a completely different level by turning a simple game of Texans versus Mexicans into a story about border patrol, illegal immigration, and what happens when the people you are trying to keep out decide they do not even want to come in anymore. The last of the Mohicans, Butters becomes a Mexican folk hero and the border patrol loses its mind. So Cartman Finds Love showed us racism that hides behind good intentions, where Cartman genuinely believed he was helping two people by pushing them together based on nothing but their skin color. That episode was about assumptions and control, but the next episode on our list takes the conversation about race in a completely different direction by tackling one of the most heated political topics in America, immigration from Mexico. Season 15, Episode 9, The Last of the Mohicans, first aired on October 12th, 2011, and it starts as a simple backyard game between kids before spiraling into a full-blown commentary on border patrol, cheap labor, and the question of whether America even deserves the immigrants it keeps trying to keep out. The title of the episode is a play on The Last of the Mohicans, the classic novel and movie, and even the title card at the beginning of the episode uses the same style of lettering. But instead of a story about Native Americans, this is a story about Butters accidentally becoming the most beloved figure in Mexico. It all starts at a sleepover at Cartman's house. The boys are playing a game they call Texans versus Mexicans. The rules are simple. One team plays the Mexicans, and their goal is to sneak past the other team and cross the border into Texas, which is just Cartman's backyard. The other team plays the Border Patrol, and their goal is to stop the Mexicans from getting through. Cartman, of course, is the leader of the Border Patrol team, and he takes the job way too seriously from the very first second. Butters starts out as the leader of the Mexican team, but the other boys quickly replace him with Kyle because they think Butters is a terrible leader. The game plays out and all of the Mexicans successfully cross the border into Cartman's backyard, which means they win. Cartman is furious, but there is a problem. Butters is not with the rest of the group. Nobody noticed, but Butters got lost during the game and never made it across. When Cartman realizes this, he sees a chance to keep the game going. As long as Butters has not crossed the border, the game is technically not over. So while Kyle and the rest of the Mexican team start putting up flyers around town to find their missing friend, Cartman puts up his own flyers telling people to shoot Butters on sight. He would rather win the game even if Butters dies than admit that the Mexicans beat him. Meanwhile, Butters is wandering through the streets at night during a snowstorm, trying to find his way back to Cartman's house. He gets hit by a passing car. The couple driving the car finds Butters lying in the road, and when they ask who he is, Butters introduces himself as mantequilla, which is just the Spanish word for butter, and says he needs to get back to his friends at the border. The couple looks at this little blonde kid and somehow concludes that he must be a Mexican immigrant. They take him to their home, bring him to a nice guest room decorated with inspirational quotes, and then immediately put him to work cleaning windows. This is the first big joke of the episode and one of its sharpest. The couple does not take Butters in out of kindness. They take him in because they think he is a Mexican worker, and to them, that means free labor. Butters does not question any of this. He just starts working, singing a little work song as he goes about his chores. He blows leaves, he cleans, he does everything the couple tells him to do, and because Butters is Butters, he does it all with a smile. Eventually, the couple takes Butters to a restaurant where the kitchen staff is mostly Mexican. Inside, Butters starts telling the workers stories about his life as mantequilla. The workers do not pay much attention at first, but when he says his name, they recognize it from the missing person flyers that the boys put up around town. They think mantequilla is someone famous. They start listening to him, and Butters, still completely in character as a lost Mexican trying to get home, starts talking about how he just wants to cross the border and get back to where he belongs. The Mexican workers hear this and completely misunderstand what he is saying. They think mantequilla is talking about going back to Mexico, and his words inspire them. If mantequilla, this legendary figure, wants to go home to Mexico, then maybe they should too. Maybe Mexico is not the terrible place they left. Maybe they should go back and make it better instead of staying in America. This is where the episode flips everything on its head. A mass departure of Mexican immigrants begins. Mexicans all across America start leaving the country and heading back to Mexico. They are not being deported. They are choosing to leave because mantequilla inspired them to feel pride in their home country. The movement grows and grows until it becomes a full-blown crisis, but not the kind of crisis anyone expected. The problem is not that Mexicans are sneaking into America, the problem is that they are leaving. As more and more Mexican workers leave the United States, everything starts falling apart. The lawns are not getting mowed. The houses are not getting cleaned. The dishes in restaurants are piling up. The Americans who relied on cheap Mexican labor for years suddenly have to do all of this work themselves, and they cannot handle it. The economy starts crashing because so much of the country's basic labor was being done by Mexican immigrants who are now gone. The episode is making a very clear point here. All those people who complained about Mexican immigrants taking jobs and crossing the border never stopped to think about what would happen if those immigrants actually left. The answer, according to South Park, is that America would completely fall apart because it depends on that labor more than it would ever admit. The situation gets so bad that the United States Border Patrol has to completely reverse its mission. Instead of stopping Mexicans from entering the country, they are now trying to stop Mexicans from leaving. Border Patrol agents start rounding up Mexican workers and ordering them to get back to their jobs. The organization that was built to keep people out is now desperately trying to keep people in. The whole system has flipped and nobody knows how to deal with it. Cartman, still obsessed with winning the backyard game, volunteers for the real United States Border Patrol. He is given an actual position and takes it just as seriously as he took the kid's game. To Cartman, there is no difference between the pretend game and the real border. He is instructed to stop Mexicans from crossing the border in either direction, and he throws himself into the job with everything he has. Down in Mexico, Butters arrives as Mantequilla and is received like a king. He is welcomed in the Zocalo, the famous public square in Mexico City, in a scene that looks like something out of Monty Python's Life of Brian, with massive crowds cheering for their new hero. Mantequilla is credited with bringing pride back to the Mexican people, with making them believe that their country is worth fighting for instead of running away from. Butters has no idea any of this is happening because of him. He is just a kid who got lost playing a game and has been calling himself by the Spanish word for his own name, but eventually Butters gets homesick. He misses South Park, he misses his family, he decides he needs to go back to America. So Mantequilla begins his journey north, trying to cross the border back into the United States. When the Border Patrol agents spot someone approaching the border from the Mexican side, they are overjoyed. After weeks of watching Mexicans leave the country, they finally see someone trying to come in. They are so happy that they make absolutely no attempt to stop him. For the first time in the episode, the Border Patrol wants someone to cross. But then Cartman shows up. He recognizes Butters and realizes that if Butters crosses the border into America, Butters wins the kid's game. Cartman cannot allow that. He tries to stop Butters himself, but the Border Patrol agents, who are thrilled that a Mexican wants to enter the country, actually turn against Cartman. They help Butters get past Cartman. They fire at Cartman to stop him from interfering. The Border Patrol is now actively fighting against the person who volunteered to help them because their priorities have completely changed. The agents who were supposed to keep Mexicans out are now protecting a Mexican from the one American who wants to stop him from coming in. The whole system has been turned upside down and inside out. Butters makes it across the border and back into South Park, which means the Mexican team officially wins the game. Cartman is devastated. The boys are all happy to have Butters back, and they have a pizza party to celebrate. But even as they welcome him, the boys still tell Butters that he would not make a good leader. In the final moment of the episode, Butters proves them wrong. He raises his arms, and from across the border, the voices of the Mexican people respond with a chant. Mantequilla's influence has not faded. Even though Butters is back in America, the movement he accidentally started is still alive. He may be a terrible leader in the eyes of his friends, but to an entire country, he is a legend. What makes The Last of the Mohicans such a smart episode is that it attacks the immigration debate from an angle that most people never think about. Most of the conversation in America about Mexican immigration is about keeping people out, building walls, adding more border patrol, making it harder to cross. But this episode asks a simple question that nobody in the debate wants to hear. What if they stopped coming? What if they left? What would America actually do without the millions of workers who mow the lawns, wash the dishes, clean the houses, and do all the jobs that most Americans do not want to do themselves? The answer, according to this episode, is panic. The episode also makes a pointed comment about how America sees itself. The Border Patrol agents, the news reporters, and the average citizens in the episode are all completely shocked that anyone would willingly leave the United States for Mexico. They cannot wrap their heads around it. The idea that America might not be the greatest place in the world for every single person is something they have never considered. The episode is not saying that Mexico is better than America. It is saying that the belief that America is automatically better than everywhere else is so deeply baked into the culture that people literally cannot process it when someone chooses to leave. The AV. Club gave the episode a B+, praising the way it used the absurd premise to comment on American attitudes toward immigration without turning it into a lecture. IGN gave it an 8 out of 10, noting that Butters' episodes always deliver strong material, and this one was no different. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while The Last of the Mohicans used immigration and border patrol as its lens for racial commentary, the next episode on our list goes back to something more personal and more uncomfortable, examining what happens when a beloved celebrity's bizarre behavior forces an entire town to confront its own racial biases, especially when the police start doing exactly what everyone claims they would never do. The Jeffersons, a Michael Jackson, racial profiling, and the police who frame rich black men. So, The Last of the Mohicans flipped the entire immigration debate on its head by asking what would happen if Mexican immigrants just stopped coming to America. That episode was about a system, about labor, about a country that does not appreciate what it has. But the next episode on our list brings the conversation about race back to something more personal and more disturbing. It is about what happens when the police decide that a man is guilty before he has done anything wrong, not because of evidence, not because of witnesses, but purely because he is rich and black. Season 8, Episode 6, The Jeffersons, first aired on April 21st, 2004, and it is one of the smartest things South Park has ever done with racial profiling. The episode opens with Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny riding their big wheels through the neighborhood when they notice that someone has moved into the Donovans' old house. A little boy wearing a mask comes out to greet them. His name is Blanket, and he tells the boys that his family moved to South Park to escape city life. The boys are not that interested at first, but when Blanket mentions that there are arcade games inside, they change their minds immediately. They walk in and discover that the house is filled with toys, games, rides, and an entire amusement park in the backyard, complete with a cotton candy machine, a train, and even a small zoo. It is a kid's dream come true. Then they meet Blanket's father, Mr. Jefferson. He is a wealthy, pale-skinned, high-voiced, extremely childlike man who wears a fake mustache and introduces himself with a burst of singing. He is very obviously meant to be Michael Jackson, right down to his mannerisms, his speaking voice, his obsession with children's toys, and the fact that his home looks exactly like Jackson's famous Neverland Ranch. But in the world of the episode, nobody ever says the name Michael Jackson. Everyone just calls him Mr. Jefferson, and the fake mustache is apparently enough to fool the entire town. Blanket almost says his father's real name at one point, but gets cut off before he can finish. The boys love Mr. Jefferson. He is the most fun adult they have ever met. He plays with them, sings with them, climbs his wishing tree with them, and treats every moment like a party. Cartman especially becomes obsessed with Mr. Jefferson to an almost scary degree. He gets jealous whenever the other boys spend time with Mr. Jefferson without him. At one point, when Kyle suggests that something might be wrong with how Mr. Jefferson behaves, Cartman threatens to physically hurt Kyle for messing up the best thing that has ever happened to their town. But while the kids are having the time of their lives, Kyle starts noticing something that nobody else seems to care about. Mr. Jefferson is neglecting his own son. Blanket is left alone constantly. Mr. Jefferson would rather play with the neighborhood kids than take care of his own child. He would rather climb the wishing tree and sing songs than make sure Blanket is safe. At one point, Kyle finds Blanket alone in the backyard late at night with nobody watching him. Kyle starts to realize that Mr. Jefferson does not really want to be a father. He wants to be a kid. He wants the childhood he never had because he spent his real childhood working, and now that he has money and freedom, he is trying to relive it at the expense of the child who actually needs a parent. Stan tells his parents about the Jeffersons, and Sharon decides to invite Mr. Jefferson over to a dinner party with Gerald, Sheila, Steven, and Linda. The dinner is awkward because Mr. Jefferson does not know how to act around adults. He is shy and uncomfortable in adult conversation, but he lights up whenever the children are mentioned. His behavior creeps out the other parents. When they confront him about it, Mr. Jefferson offers Randy and Sharon $100 each to drop the subject. Randy takes the money without hesitation, but Sharon is disturbed enough to forbid the boys from seeing Mr. Jefferson anymore. None of the boys have a problem with this except Cartman, who tells Sharon to her face that she can perform an obscene act using language that only Cartman would use in front of someone's mother. Now here is where the episode turns from a Michael Jackson parody into something much bigger. At the Park County Police Station, Sergeant Harrison Yates gets a report about the new family in town. The report says two things. They are wealthy and they are black. That is all Yates needs to hear. He immediately mobilizes the entire police department to go frame Mr. Jefferson for a crime, not investigate him, not look into whether he has done anything wrong. Frame him. The cops openly talk about how much they hate rich black people and how their job is to plant evidence and destroy them. They go to Mr. Jefferson's house in the middle of the night and plant cocaine, blood, and other evidence throughout the home, then sit back and wait for him to show up so they can discover it. But when the officers actually see Mr. Jefferson in person, they are confused. He does not look black. His skin is pale from years of cosmetic changes. The cops call off the operation because they think they made a mistake. Yates goes home defeated and tells his wife he is thinking about quitting the force. But his wife talks him back into it. She tells him that framing wealthy black people is in his blood, that it is what he was born to do. She convinces him to stay on the job and look deeper into the Jefferson case. Yates calls the police department in Santa Barbara, which is where the real Michael Jackson lived and where he was facing actual charges at the time this episode aired. The Santa Barbara cops tell Yates that they had been trying to frame a rich black man for child abuse, but the man did not look black at all, and he ran away before they could finish the job. Yates realizes that Mr. Jefferson is the same man, and the operation is back on. This is the racial profiling message at the heart of the episode. The South Park police do not care whether Mr. Jefferson actually did anything wrong. They do not investigate. They do not gather real evidence. They do not interview witnesses. Their entire motivation is that a black man has more money than they do, and they cannot stand it. The episode is saying as bluntly as possible that the justice system targets black people not because of what they do, but because of who they are and what they have. The police in this episode are not fighting crime. They are punishing success. While the police are scheming, things at the Jefferson house are getting worse. Mr. Jefferson refuses to let Blanket go outside anymore because he believes everyone is out to get them. Stan and Kyle become genuinely afraid for Blanket's safety, especially after they see Mr. Jefferson dangling the boy from the balcony of his house, which is a direct reference to the real incident in 2002 when Michael Jackson dangled his baby from a hotel balcony in Berlin. The boys decide they need to rescue Blanket. They sneak into the house at night and switch Blanket with Kenny, who is disguised as the child. Mr. Jefferson's face, meanwhile, is literally falling apart. Years of plastic surgery have left his features unstable, and pieces of his face are coming off and rearranging themselves. He calls his plastic surgeon in California, begging for help, but the surgeon refuses to come out and fix him. As his appearance becomes more and more horrifying, Mr. Jefferson puts on a red jumpsuit that looks exactly like the outfit from the famous Thriller music video and starts chasing Stan and Kyle through the house, wanting them to play with him. They run to Blanket's room where Mr. Jefferson finds Kenny disguised as his son. Overjoyed, Mr. Jefferson throws Blanket into the air to play, but throws Kenny so high that his head smashes through the ceiling. Kenny is killed. Stan yells his classic line, and Kyle yells his. The commotion alerts the police, who have been waiting outside. Everything comes to a head in front of the whole town. Cartman stands up and defends Mr. Jefferson, saying that the man never had a proper childhood and that is why he acts the way he does. It is not his fault, he just wants to be a kid because he never got to be one. But Kyle counters with the most important line in the episode. He says that even if everything Cartman is saying is true, even if Mr. Jefferson never had a childhood, even if the police really do spend all their time framing rich black men, none of that changes the fact that Mr. Jefferson has a child of his own now. He has to grow up. He does not get to relive his childhood at the cost of his sons. Mr. Jefferson hears what Kyle is saying and realizes he is right. He decides to change. He is going to be a real father to Blanket, and to make sure the police have no reason to come after him anymore, he gives away all of his money to the needy. The moment Mr. Jefferson is no longer rich, Sergeant Yates completely loses interest. He says there is no point in putting another poor black man in jail. The police only cared about him because he was wealthy. The second the money is gone, so is their motivation. The episode is saying that the police did not see a crime. They saw a dollar sign attached to a black man, and that was enough. The episode ends with Mr. Jefferson singing a song with the townspeople about growing up and being a better person. Though the lyrics hint at something darker about his past behavior with children, it is the show's way of having it both ways. The episode defends Mr. Jefferson against the racist police who framed him, but it also does not let him completely off the hook for the way he lived. Amazon's official review at the time noted that the episode portrays Michael Jackson not as a child molester, but as an infantile parent who needs to grow up. That is exactly right. The episode is not about whether Mr. Jefferson is guilty of the crimes the police are trying to pin on him. It is about two things happening at the same time. A black man being targeted by a racist system that does not care about justice, and that same man failing his own child because he cannot let go of the past. Both things are true, both things need to be addressed, and neither one excuses the other. This episode also marked a major turning point for the character of Sergeant Yates, who would go on to become one of South Park's most consistently racist recurring characters. His introduction here, as a cop who openly admits to framing rich black people and whose wife tells him it is in his blood, set the tone for how the show would portray law enforcement for the next 20 years. The episode aired on April 21st, 2004, the exact same time that a real California grand jury was considering charges against Michael Jackson for child abuse. The timing was no accident. South Park produced the episode in just days, as they always do, and aired it while the story was still dominating the news. The episode holds an 8.6 out of 10 on IMDb and is regularly cited as one of the strongest episodes of Season 8. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while the Jeffersons used one celebrity's story to expose how the police treat rich black men, the next and final episode on our list goes back to where this whole video started, back to the character who has been at the center of more racial episodes than anyone else on this show, back to the one kid in South Park whose name itself became a controversy that lasted for over 20 years. The Big Fix, and the name that fooled everyone for 20 years. So the Jeffersons showed us a police department that would frame a man for being rich and black without ever caring whether he actually committed a crime. That episode used a celebrity's story to pull back the curtain on racial profiling, but this final episode on our list does something that no other show on television has ever done. It does not just talk about race. It does not just make fun of racism, it turns the camera around and points it directly at you, the viewer, and asks you a question that you are not ready for. Season 25, Episode 2, The Big Fix, first aired on February 9th, 2022, and it is the episode that broke the brains of every single person who had been watching South Park for the last 2 decades. The episode starts with Randy Marsh attending a cannabis expo where he learns that customers are boycotting farms that are completely white-owned. Randy panics. He goes home and talks to Sharon, Shelly, and Stan about the fact that their family does not really have any black friends. Randy zeroes in on the fact that Stan never seems to hang out with his black classmate, Token Black. Stan agrees to invite Token and his parents, Steve and Linda Black, over for dinner at the farm. During dinner, something happens that changes everything. Steve Black casually mentions that his son is named after J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings. Stan freezes. His name is not Token, it is Tolkien. T-O-L-K-I-E-N, named after the man who wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Stan has been calling this kid Token in his head for years, assuming that the only black kid in his class was named after the phrase token black guy, the term for a minority character who only exists to fill a diversity spot. Stan's entire understanding of his friend's name was built on a racist assumption, and he never once questioned it. The next day at school, Stan starts asking around. He asks Kyle. Kyle knew. He asked the girls. Wendy, Red, Bebe, and Nellie all raised their hands when asked if they knew how Tolkien's name was spelled. Stan asks Cartman, pointing out that Cartman once wore a shirt that said, "Token's life matters." Cartman says he always knew the name came from J.R.R. Tolkien, but just did not know Tolkien was spelled with an L. Stan is horrified to realize that he is the only person in the entire school who made this mistake. Stan goes to see Dr. Gush, his doctor, without his parents. The doctor is friendly at first, but when Stan admits that he thought his black classmate's name was Token, the doctor's entire attitude changes. He becomes angry and hostile. Then Doctor. Ghosh turns and looks directly into the camera, breaking the wall between the show and the audience. He says he wonders if anyone else out there thought this kid's name was Token. He asks if anyone watching just assumed that a black couple would name their child Token. He calls it disgusting and says that if you did, you are the problem. This is the moment that made the entire internet lose its mind. Because the truth is, every single viewer thought his name was Token. It was Token. For over 20 years since the character first appeared in Season 2, his name was spelled Token in the subtitles, on the official South Park website, in the video games, on merchandise, and in every piece of official material the show ever released. The character was literally created as a joke about tokenism, about being the one black kid in an all-white town. That was the entire point of his name, but Trey Parker and Matt Stone did something nobody expected. They went back and changed everything. After The Big Fix aired, Comedy Central went through every single past episode and changed the subtitles from Token to Tolkien. The official South Park website changed every mention. The character pages were updated. Even the mobile game South Park Phone Destroyer changed the spelling on all 5 of Tolkien's character cards. The only exception was when Stan or Randy said the name, because in the world of the show, those two were the only ones who did not know. The result was a kind of manufactured false memory on a massive scale. If you went back to watch old episodes after The Big Fix aired, the subtitles would say Tolkien. If you checked the official website, it would say Tolkien. If you searched your memory and tried to prove that his name used to be Token, the evidence had been erased. Parker and Stone gaslit their entire audience as part of the joke, and they did it so thoroughly that some fans genuinely started wondering if they had been wrong the whole time. Back in the episode, Stan tries to make up for his mistake by reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. He does a presentation in class, suggesting that the books be made required reading so that Tolkien would not feel isolated. He even organizes a school assembly for J.R.R. Tolkien Appreciation Day. But when Stan invites Tolkien up to the stage to speak, Tolkien grabs the microphone and says that he hates J.R.R. Tolkien's books. He has always hated them. He cannot stand them. He drops the microphone and walks off. Stan's overreaction is the second layer of the joke. He is so consumed by guilt that he swings in the opposite direction and starts making everything about Tolkien's name, which is exactly what Tolkien does not want. Stan is not listening to what Tolkien actually thinks or feels. He is performing allyship, doing big public gestures to prove he is not racist instead of just treating his friend like a normal person. Meanwhile, Randy's side of the story mirrors the same problem. After learning that white-owned farms are losing business, Randy convinces Steve Black to become his business partner at Tegritti Farms, but Randy does not actually treat Steve as a partner. He uses Steve's face for billboards and promotional materials while shutting down every idea Steve brings to the table. When Steve suggests a cannabis line based on the races of Middle-earth from The Lord of the Rings, Randy and Towley shoot it down as dorky. Steve realizes he is nothing but a token black person in Randy's business, which is exactly the thing the episode is named after fixing. Steve quits and opens his own weed farm called Credigree Weed right across the street from Tegritti Farms, using the same ideas Randy rejected. The episode ends with Stan admitting to Tolkien that he made a mistake about his name, and saying he understands if Tolkien does not want to be friends anymore. Tolkien tells Stan he does not really have a choice, since his family just moved to the farm across the street. It is not a dramatic speech or a big emotional moment, it is just two kids figuring it out. Randy, on the other hand, sees Steve's new farm and declares war. Then Dr. Ghosh appears one final time, looking straight into the camera again. He says that many people suffer from unconscious biases, and that if you or someone you know also thought Tolkien's name did not come from J.R.R. Tolkien, you should call 1-800-I-am-a-giant-piece-of-shit because you are the problem. The episode holds an 8.0 out of 10 on IMDb, but the number does not capture what this episode really did. For over 20 years, South Park had a character whose name was a racial joke. And instead of just quietly changing it and pretending it never happened, they turned the change itself into the joke. They made every viewer question their own memory. They made everyone uncomfortable. And underneath all the comedy, they made a real point about how easily we make assumptions about people based on race without even realizing we are doing it. What makes The Big Fix the perfect ending for this video is that it is not just about the characters on screen. Every other episode on this list, you could watch and think about how racist Cartman is, or how corrupt the police are, or how messed up the adults in South Park behave. You could laugh at them and feel separate from the joke. But this episode does not let you do that. This episode makes you the joke. You thought his name was Token. You assumed for 20 years that a black kid was named after a racist trope, and you never questioned it. Not once. And that is where our list ends. 12 episodes, 12 different ways that South Park held up a mirror to America and said, look at what you are really thinking. From Cartman's schemes to the police framing innocent men to an entire audience learning that they had been calling a black kid by a racist name for 2 decades without a second thought. But if you think this is everything South Park has to say about race, you are not even close. These 12 episodes are just the beginning. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.